Hello.
And welcome to Are You Karate Kidding Me?
Which is a podcast devoted to all things Karate Kid, particularly that continuity of the Karate Kid we call the Miyagi-verse.
Yes, the Miyagi-verse. So only movies and TV shows that directly follow the continuity of the first Karate Kid from 1984.
With apologies to Jackie Chan, whose movie we might also see someday.
I don't think Jackie Chan's got any problems.
No, I think he's doing all right.
Yeah.
Just as he is.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, my name is Collin.
My name is Jenny, and we love the Karate Kid.
That's true. Now, I'm a relatively recent convert. I've kind of absorbed Karate Kid through the culture throughout the years, and I didn't think I needed to see it. But after having seen it now several times, I realized just what a well-constructed movie it is.
And I have been a fan of the Karate Kid since I was 5 years old. I'm one of the people who rented and then watched the VHS recording off of HBO of the Karate Kid many times.
Absolutely.
Yes, we've both just come from seeing it for the first time, both of us on the big screen. And we're here to comment on what we saw based on, well, you know.
Yeah, so today we're going to do a recap of the Karate Kid, and eventually we'll get to the... our plan for the show is to eventually get to all of them, but today we're going to do Karate Kid, so let's just jump right in.
We should. All right, so obviously it begins with Daniel and his mom, Lucille, the LaRussos, a single-parent household, because we don't know yet what happened to Daniel's dad, but he's died, and they are driving west from Newark, New Jersey to somewhere in the San Fernando Valley.
Yes.
Because his mom wants to make a new life for them in California.
Yes. And they wind up, I assume, in Reseda.
In Reseda,
standard Southern California stucco job.
Indeed, standard stucco job, and we see right away, after their epic journey, which actually looks like that's how the actors got to California, because body doubles, or who look a whole lot like them, are in their car at various locations across the country.
Yeah, there's some nice location shooting.
Indeed, Sedona, Texas. Well done, John Avildsen, the director of this film. Well done. So they arrive, and you can tell right away that Daniel's mom is trying to sell it real hard, and Daniel is not feeling California at all. In fact, like, he only brought an empty suitcase looking thing and a bike. Like,
he's putting on a brave face at this point.
Yeah.
He's not. If he is not enjoying it, he's certainly not letting it show.
No.
And right away, we establish a few things about Daniel. We know Daniel's first act in the movie is karate kicking open the fence.
That's right.
We're really establishing our themes hard in the way that a really classic movie does.
And we know that Daniel's a sweet guy, because even though he's got this East Coast swagger and he's karate kicking the gate in, his first character-defining act is to get a bowl of water for a sweet dog that he sees sitting outside in the apartment complex.
With its owner, yeah.
But also, at the same time that he's doing that lets us see that he can't get water out of the faucet very well, and so he has to go talk to the maintenance man, and this is our introduction to Mr. Miyagi. Pat Morita is Mr. Miyagi.
Pat Morita is Mr. Miyagi.
And we should add that Daniel LaRusso is played by the inimitable Ralph Macchio.
Yes.
And Lucille LaRusso is played by Randy Heller.
Yes. Now, this is a topic that I kind of want to dive in on a little bit. We've had over 30 years now to kind of sit with the Karate Kid and saturate it, and we know the movie inside out at this point. But if you're watching the Karate Kid for the first time in the theaters in 1984, I feel like Mr. Miyagi is being established as kind of an aloof guy, kind of a weirdo, because in the first scene, he's trying to catch a fly with chopsticks, and Daniel interrupts him. And Miyagi is like...
After. After what? After.
Yeah, he's very brusque and not interested.
Yeah, he's being presented as a very mysterious figure and a bit of a weirdo. And he kind of holds on to this throughout the most of the first half of the movie.
That's right. Well, he hasn't yet opened his heart up to Daniel, and we don't yet know that he's going to be on an arc of his own. We don't know who's going to be special here.
He warms up to Daniel, but we don't know how seriously they're taking each other yet.
Exactly.
But anyway, we'll come back to that maybe a little bit more in a minute. The next scene, we find Daniel at the beach, a party that he was invited to in the very first scene.
Daniel, when he karate kicked that gate, he accidentally kicked his neighbor on the other side of the gate. Mm-hmm. And the neighbor was a kid about his age and invites him to a beach party. I don't know which beach. I think they shot this in Malibu. But anyway, at that party, they see rich kids from the Encino Hills. And what's really interesting about this scene is that the producer, Jerry Weintraub, as some of you may remember from the Ocean's 11 movies, Jerry Weintraub was the producer on this film, and he was like, let's get a bunch of children of Hollywood celebrities to be in this beach scene.
Yeah, that's kind of a wild Easter egg.
Yeah, so you've got like Frankie Avalon's kid and all these other people, playing soccer or grilling hot dogs on the beach.
Yeah. There's a lot happening in this beach scene. We see Allie for the first time, played by Elizabeth Shue.
And she is, Elizabeth Shue and her hair are 2 MVPs.
Yes.
In this movie, both separately and together.
Yeah.
Yes. We know that Ralph Macchio plays soccer, or rather that Daniel LaRusso plays soccer, and that, while he's enthusiastic about karate, soccer is his deal.
Karate Kid is presented as this zero to hero story. I feel like they're not presenting Daniel as completely inept, right? He's athletic.
He's a fish out of water.
Yeah.
He's totally the king of the hill in New Jersey, is my guess. Like, he kicks ass at soccer, and he's got all these friends who see him off in the opening scenes. But, out here in California, he's not necessarily a wimp. He just doesn't fit in there. Yeah. And particularly because it's a John Avildsen film, right? His hero is Frank Capra, and he made a lot of stuff through Critique Society. You can tell that they're trying to show that Daniel has to compete in this like hyper-capitalist California world where the rich people are really strong and really built, and the poor kids can't even participate in their trials of strength.
I could totally see some very like It's a Wonderful Life moments between Elizabeth Shue and Ralph Macchio. Like if they had slid the what was it from the It's a Wonderful Life, the sock hop scene where where Jimmy Stewart falls into the pool.
Buffalo Gals. I
could totally see that happening to Ralph Macchio. Like Johnny would have been the one to pull the lever to open the pool up.
Oh my God, yes, totally.
Hey, this is my band.
Oh, why don't you stop annoying people?
Well, I'm sorry. Hey.
And I mean, like, and this is also the scene, obviously, where we meet the bullies and the chief bully,
speaking of Johnny,
the Karate King, Johnny Lawrence, played by Billy Zabka, and his pals, the Cobra Kais, who have a bunch of cool people in them, like Chad McQueen, Steve McQueen's son. And so this is the moment where we see the Cobra Kais cruise up on their bicycles. They're all karate students together, and Johnny sees that Daniel is flirting with Allie. That Ralph Macchio and Elizabeth Shue are hitting it off on the beach. Yeah. And so, even though Johnny's trying to get his life together and this is the year he's going to make it, it's his senior year, and we get the sense that it's actually Daniel and Allie's junior year. And he looks down the hill and sees that his just recently ex-girlfriend, who he hasn't let go of, is macking on this new shrimpy kid from New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Johnny's introduction line is like,
I'm living clean now.
He's like... He makes some line to the effect of like, oh, this year's going to be different. Like, I have 1 year to make it work. 8 a.m. tomorrow is the first day of school. Is he turning over a new leaf or not? Because it doesn't, again, they kind of drop that thread pretty quickly. Well, in Johnny's
headcanon of his relationship with Allie, they were just on a break. It was just a temporary blip, and he was going to win her back. Until Daniel stuck up for Allie when she said she didn't want to talk to Johnny, and all hell broke loose.
Okay.
And rightly... according to Johnny and his ego, this cannot be. So he beats Daniel to a pulp.
Yeah.
But Daniel, we also learned, was willing to get back up for more, right? Like, he, even having already been hit a couple times, gets up and punches Johnny in the nose. Daniel loses that fight and gets his ass handed to him. He's a fighter. Exactly.
Johnny is, by the way, like William Zabka at this point. He's huge. Most people in this movie are huge compared to Ralph Macchio. Even Allie a little bit, but I think that's mostly just the 80s perm.
That's the MVP hair. It's part of the hair's peak performance.
Yes.
But, we also see that this scene, which, at the end of it, Daniel is left lying on the beach, and the new friends that he'd made ran off. The Cobra Kai karate gang... has driven over to the campsite with their motorbikes. And Allie comes over to offer Daniel help. And Daniel's too proud to take her help.
Yes.
So Daniel hasn't yet learned to accept help himself.
Daniel takes his licks, and then we catch up to them the very next scene at soccer tryouts, the high school the next morning.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the Bananarama.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So Bananarama, this bass line is driving through the entire scene beginning to end. Like they play with the mix a little bit, but It's not something you see anymore, where it's like, oh, we paid for this pop song, we're going to use the whole thing.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, so during these scenes in high school, we see that Daniel is getting to know the social landscape, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's Allie's a cheerleader, and Elizabeth Shue actually is tumbling. That's true.
That's true.
And we see that Daniel, who's come here being really good at soccer, the Cobra Kai's team up to get him back, trip him, instigate a fight, kind of push him to fight with them, and then he gets kicked out of the tryouts. So he's lost his special gift.
Another weird observation that I made is this is kind of a very, like, loosey-goosey, like, free period, gym period. Everybody's on the field at once. The cheerleaders are over here doing their practicing, yet Daniel and
there are only
Cobra
about 60
Kai's,
people in the high school overall.
Right.
West
Well,
Valley
it's
High.
like, but it's like some of the shots are quite deep, and everybody's on the field at once. Like, the only time we see a coach is when the fight starts, and then the coach just instantly dives in and is like, break it up. But I'm like, I don't remember any of my gym classes being like this, where it's like everybody pile onto the field and everybody do whatever they're supposed to be doing.
Maybe it's after school, though. I mean,
It could be after school.
This occurs to me that maybe this moment in which Daniel is trying out for soccer and the cheerleaders are all practicing, it's probably like the afternoon.
Yeah, or a free period.
But it's soccer tryouts. So usually something like soccer tryouts would be scheduled at a different time.
Right.
Unless it's California where everything's just free flowing and
Daniel's like showing like Allie how to juggle the soccer ball on his knee.
That's how they've been flirting with each other since the beach. Is that they
they were doing that on the beach too. Yeah.
The soccer ball.
But again, showing that Daniel has some agility.
Growing up in South Texas, and this was the first thing I saw of soccer. One of the first things I saw of soccer. I thought that's actually what soccer was. That you bop it, because I was 4 or 5 years old. That you just hit it with your knee, and that you would do that during the game.
Well, I mean, theoretically you could.
I didn't realize that they were playing the game of love, which is a different kind of soccer game.
Love games.
Love game, yes. We know now that Daniel is a hothead. Mm-hmm. He has a heart of gold. He's got a lot of swagger, but he's a hothead and he's prideful.
Right.
Those are two things that we learned from this scene where the Cobra Kais conspire to piss him off so much that he attacks them and gets kicked out of the tryouts.
Yes.
And obviously, these guys are strength in numbers. They're kicking his ass.
Yes.
So he goes home to learn karate from a book.
And this is also where Mr. Miyagi comes back into the picture.
Yeah.
So Daniel's back at his apartment reading how to do karate out of a book, as you do. And Mr. Miyagi comes in to fix the faucet. He's kind of giving him like a skeptical eye. Like, because when Daniel, like, Mr. Miyagi notices that Daniel has a black eye.
Yeah, Daniel's got a black eye.
Yeah.
And Daniel, of course, says it's a bike accident.
Yeah. And Mr. Miyagi's like, oh, you're lucky you didn't hurt your hand. And then all the while, Daniel's practicing, Miyagi's kind of giving him a little bit of the side eye.
Right. I mean, but I don't know if Miyagi's side-eyeing Daniel. I think Miyagi's actually interested in Daniel for the first time. Because he totally dismissed him. And now he's like, hey, why is this kid trying to learn karate? And you're learning from a book? Like, what's going on with you?
Yeah.
At this point, Miyagi still wouldn't presume that his help is needed.
But he's got his attention.
Sorely needed.
Yes.
It's interesting to watch, to shift POV when you watch this movie, because, you're invited to look at this through Daniel's point of view.
Yes.
But in reality, looking at it from Mr. Miyagi's as the focus gives you a totally different perspective on how he develops interest in this kid.
We jump to, I guess, the next school day, because we're back in the cafeteria, yeah?
Yeah, I don't know. The passage of time in this movie,
I'm presuming.
The passage of time in The Karate Kid is like Star Wars Lightspeed. It moves at the speed of plot. So you just never know. Yeah. But, we know that Daniel's hitting on Allie. We know that he's afraid. She tells him that Johnny's been her ex for a few weeks, and weeks could be anything from like 2 weeks ago to, 8 weeks ago. We don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're good enough to give us a couple of markers that we'll get to in a minute, Halloween being one of the notable ones.
That's true.
He's in the cafeteria having kind of a disgusting-looking lunch,
as
all
point.
Cafeteria food tends to be. Elizabeth Shue catches up to him, and man, she she is really sweet on him. Like,
yes, she is.
Yeah, because she's approaching him. He's not doing anything.
Well, he's totally pro-feminist. Like, he helped her get her. He tried to save her radio, and Johnny was threatening to break it. I mean,
no, he's a real hero. No doubt about that. And he's got a heart of gold.
And not only does he have a heart of gold, he's got sweet eyes and floppy hair. I mean,
I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah,
I'm not judging anybody in this movie
That's
for their
true.
actions. This movie is really even-handed in the way it handles pretty much all the characters.
Except for maybe
Kreese.
Yeah, the evil sensei.
Fear does not exist in this dojo, does it? No, Sensei! Pain does not exist in this dojo, does it? No, Sensei! Defeat does not exist in this dojo, does it? No, Sensei!
John Bad Sensei Kreese.
Yeah, a classic 80s villain where he's like, there's no gray area with Kreese.
And then we meet Kreese, right? Because Daniel is like, oh my God, I really want to date this girl. I need to learn how to not get my ass kicked by her ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
And I love karate, so I'm going to go to this karate school next to the place where my mom is now. Apparently, even though they came out there for Lucille to work in computers, she now had to get a job as a restaurant hostess.
Yes.
And maybe that's a deleted scene or something. But anyway, he goes into this karate school. Mm-hmm. There is a terrifying, special ops drill sergeant looking guy.
Yes.
Drilling the teenagers, the Cobra Kais,
yes.
in what look like Hitler Youth positions.
Yeah.
And Daniel then sees Johnny Lawrence, his new arch rival.
Yeah, and
is
Johnny
the star
sees
pupil.
Daniel too.
And Johnny sees Daniel and gives him the jerk smirk.
Kreese's whole thing is like, yeah, he's ex-army, he was in Vietnam, apparently, and like this is our attempt to kind of win the Vietnam War by proxy. You know, Kreese training all these young kids to take no mercy and to destroy all their enemies. And if Kreese can't win Vietnam, he can at least win this goddamn karate tournament that's coming up.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, there's a case to be made as we get toward the tournament that really the entire tournament is some sort of trial of strength between of mental strength and of pedagogical strength between Kreese and Miyagi, and that it's really about maybe even like U.S. imperialism and what side of America will win. Will it be like
that is very true
brawn, authoritarian power versus peaceful multilateralism?
Yes,
that's really at the heart of that conflict. I mean, in that sense. And again, I'm foreshadowing what I'd like to say later, but The Karate Kid really is kind of a Cold War movie.
Like, well, I mean, in the same way that all like 80s movies can draw some lines back to the Cold War.
We know that Daniel now is going to have to rule out going to become a Cobra Kai because they are Hitler Youth. Mm-hmm. And, his mom, he goes back to the restaurant, tells his mom, because the restaurant's right by the dojo, just about his day, and she asks about girlfriends, and he mentions Allie. So we can tell the way he talks about Allie that he's really, really smitten too. Mm-hmm. And in a brilliant shot, John Avildsen, the director, shows us the Cobra Kais know that Daniel's there. They notice him and plot to attack him, which they do in short order.
Yes, there's a couple scenes like this where Avildsen is playing with foreground stuff versus background stuff. And while Daniel and his mom are having like this foreground conversation, the Cobra Kais are having some fun in the deep background. And you really, having just seen it in the theater, it's much more interesting to pick up those details than on home video.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, like this movie it's really worth saying, like, it has such an artist's eye. I mean, Avildsen was was a lifelong photographer, videographer, editor, and so he has like an artist's appreciation, like an auteur, without the ego surrounding idea of the auteur. So he applies these really cool artistic approaches to super mundane, grounded scenes.
There's some shots and compositions in this movie. They're
just beautiful.
They're unmatched. Unmatched.
Yeah, and so it's really like you're sitting there watching this kid talk to his mom about a girl he likes, and these jerk karate gang members in the background plotting to attack him, and you're like, this is a gorgeous shot. It's like if Frank Capra had Hitchcock's eye.
Whoa.
Well, it's accurate.
I'm not arguing that.
But the Cobra Kais have now seen Daniel and plot to attack him, which they do on his bike ride home. They knock him down a hill on their motorbikes.
Yes. Daniel is completely unmatched riding a regular bicycle against a bunch of thugs on motorbikes. Pretty rough stuff.
Yeah.
And you were telling me that they were training on those motorbikes pretty hard, right?
Yeah, they trained and they still didn't have it, so like they took a Sunday, which apparently they had triple pay to go do on the old because Columbia lot or something, was roaring around on their motorbikes. I mean, can you imagine being these kids shooting this movie?
Let's
like,
go ride dirt bikes all weekend.
Or you've all been cast in a karate gang, and now you get to train and become badass, and then also you will be riding karate bikes all weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Karate bikes.
Karate bikes, exactly.
All right, anyway, so they knocked Daniel down the hill. He gets really banged up, and he not only physically hurt, but deeply, deeply emotionally hurt. When he gets back to the apartment, he throws something of a fit. Like,
his bike is wrecked.
His bike is wrecked. His pride is wrecked. He's hurt.
They're lucky there was no internal bleeding. Robert Mark came and wrote the screenplay, and I'm like, dude, you're asking Daniel to take a lot of hits.
They got to kind of play fast and loose with exactly how injured Daniel is from moment to moment. Usually the worst he gets is like a black eye. It's just interesting to notice. For the most part, they do a great job. Like, because it's like he'll have a black eye in one scene, and then we'll know it's a couple days later because he'll have slightly less of a black eye in the next scene. So Daniel freaks out. He has an argument with his mom.
Yeah, well, I just want to go home. That's it. I don't understand the rules here. I want to go home.
At this point, he's full-blown, like, homesick. He's like, I do not want to be here.
You never asked me if I wanted to come here.
Get me the heck out of here.
And I
don't want any part of it.
And he has his meltdown while slamming angrily against the wall
of Mr. Miyagi's workshop.
Yeah, Mr. Miyagi's workshop, which, by the way, they built into a carport just for the movie. It wasn't really there.
Yeah, it's this great tracking shot where they follow Daniel and his mom out, and they walk off screen up to their apartment, and then we pan back, and then Miyagi just opens the door a little bit. It's like, just gives us that hint. It's
and
like,
he nods.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's what's going on with this kid. Right? This kid said it was a bike accident, but no, it's not just a bike accident. Yeah. There's something more happening to this kid.
Keeping Miyagi a little mysterious, still interesting.
In just a minute, Daniel is going to be picked up by Mr. Miyagi, not necessarily as his student, but as his friend.
Yeah.
But you know, we see that Daniel is not processing this well. He goes to school. Allie's trying to talk to him. He's flirting with her. He's wearing his very styling plaid shirt and camo pants.
Yeah.
Never seen that combination anywhere else in my life.
Daniel is rocking some very interesting styles in this movie. Like, he's doing that poor kid thing where he just doesn't have any care to, like, whether he's matchy or whether he's not a stylish person by nature.
I think he is. I just think that he's living in the 80s. When styles were differently matched.
I don't remember.
But, I mean, his clothes are obviously not as expensive as Johnny Lawrence.
I remember camo being a thing in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's not the only one. There's some choice T-shirts and stuff that I was noticing during the big screen presentation.
Oh, yeah.
That's definitely worth checking out if you see it in high def. Oh, that was the other thing. This is the scene where Allie's friend Susan, right? I think it's Susan. Like, she
asked him if he has a bike.
He asked him if he has a bike, and he says it's a Miyagi Turbo.
Miyagi Turbo. We don't know that he knows Mr. Miyagi's name, but he's already starting to think about Mr. Miyagi for some reason.
I would presume he knows his name because that would be too weird a coincidence otherwise.
Yeah.
Like, but again, it's this thing that they're doing. This is prime screenwriting 101 stuff where it's like.
He's getting incepted with the idea of Mr. Miyagi.
Exactly. Like, everything in the movie is tying back to everything else in the movie. Even though it's just a throwaway line, it's like he could have said any bike name or whatever, or they could have done like a product placement there or whatever.
Yep.
They didn't. They specifically called out Mr. Miyagi because Mr. Miyagi's on Daniel's mind and Daniel's on Mr. Miyagi's
But yet
mind.
It's a version of Mr. Miyagi because at this point Daniel hasn't yet learned to pronounce his name.
That's true.
So he's
another big
fashioning
hurdle.
himself around the idea of this guy.
Yeah.
Maybe just because he threw his bike away in the dumpster next to his work shed, but like that's what's going on. And we also see in this scene though that Daniel is not up to confronting Johnny just socially. Like Allie's like, let's walk this way, and Daniel's like, I gotta go get off my case.
Yeah.
So he kind of refuses the call to be Allie's guy in that scene. Like,
that's true.
You know, maybe out of good reason because he really will get his ass kicked, but you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
And now he's riding the bus. So by the time he gets home, it's dark, and he finds at the top of the stairs in front of apartment 20 that Mr. Miyagi has fixed his bike.
Yes, and it's never looked better. In fact, it probably looks better than it did at the beginning of the movie.
It is glistening.
Yeah.
It is glistening like the time that Yoda pulled Luke Skywalker's X-Wing. out of the Dagobah swamp.
Very much so.
Yes,
Yeah, there's
yeah.
a lot of parallels here
Yeah.
to a Star Wars style like call to adventure narrative.
Exactly.
So so Daniel goes to thank Mr. Miyagi, and what is
Yeah.
Mr. Miyagi doing? He's working.
Mr.
on
Miyagi is working on his bonsai trees.
Bonsai tree.
Not bonsai trees, but bonsai.
Bonsai tree.
Bonsai.
bonsai.
Yeah. Baby trees.
Bonsai.
And not bonsai as in
bombs away.
Bonsai tree.
But no.
Yes, exactly.
Indeed. Yeah, and so I think this is one of my top 3 favorite scenes in the movie.
Yeah?
Yeah, because it's just so sweet, and it's all about Mr. Miyagi knowing now that Daniel needs help. And, he's letting Daniel in. Come inside if you want to see what I'm doing. Come inside. And he shows Daniel how to trim a bonsai tree.
Yeah, he really lets Daniel into his world in a way that is very tender and very nurturing.
Yeah.
He's very patient with Daniel. Daniel's not like... I think Daniel's kind of bowled over with Mr. Miyagi at this point, but they've only just met, so he's still curious. He tells him about Okinawa, which is great.
He says, "Where'd you learn this?" And he said, "Okinawa, my country, not Japan. Okinawa is south of Japan." So
yeah.
Mr. Miyagi is strongly identifies as Okinawan, and Daniel even though he's still mispronouncing Mr. Miyagi's name, Daniel is conscientious and learns that Okinawa is where he's from.
Mr. Miyagi gives him a quick lesson in how to trim a bonsai.
Yeah, because all you have to do is close your eyes and just see only the tree. And whatever you see, if it comes from inside you, then it's the right thing to see.
And then his mom comes in right at the end to kind of hammer it all home. He gives them both bonsai trees. And
time passes because it's Halloween.
Yes.
And now Daniel just hangs out in Mr. Miyagi's workshop.
Drawing parallels to other 80s movies. He's a real Marty McFly here, hanging out in Doc's workshop.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, right? The Back to the Future parallels, I could draw a million of them, but that's one I noticed.
Appropriately so, because Crispin Glover was considered for Johnny Lawrence.
Which would have been scary as hell.
And Eric Stoltz, the Marty McFly who would have been...
Yes.
Was considered for Daniel LaRusso.
Ah, Stoltz, what are you doing, man? You blew 2. You could have had both. You'd gotten neither.
I know. You know what? He might be the happier man. We just don't know.
We'll never know, but
in the words of Garth Brooks, he may be thanking God for unanswered prayers.
Yes, exactly.
We don't know. No, so anyways, yes, it is true. So now time has passed. Daniel and Mr. Miyagi are tight. They're pals. Mr. Miyagi calls him Daniel's son for the first time.
Yep.
And Mr. Miyagi is encouraging Daniel to go out. I think the subtext is go find a girl, go to the Halloween dance. Why aren't you going? And Daniel's like, I'd go if I could be an invisible man.
Yes.
And Mr. Miyagi's like, invisible man? And we see the components of Daniel's Halloween costume hanging on the wall.
Directly behind Mr. Miyagi. Again, this is such great attention to detail filmmaking. The components for Daniel's Halloween costume are hanging directly behind Mr. Miyagi, and in the very next scene, he has built a complete shower costume. The costume has a curtain around it, which allows Daniel to essentially be an invisible man. He can go to the dance. Nobody knows it's him. Somehow Allie just knows.
Because he hides all the time.
I guess. It is a very odd thing, and the other characters kind of lampshade it and kind of call it out. It's Susan and the other one, who I don't even know that character's name, but she's like, how do you know? And she's like, I just know, because it's true love.
I just know.
It's true teenage love.
It's true love, and also Allie is dressed as Princess Leia.
Well, the royalty-free version, if you got it at Party City, it would be called Space Princess or something.
It's the costume that an actual high school kid would have made.
That's true. It's like her mom would be like, oh, you want to go as Princess Leia? Here, I got these weird earrings.
And that's one reason why The Karate Kid is so good, because the world building suggests real people doing things.
No, it's
airbrushed.
One of the most grounded movies. Everything that Mr. Miyagi is saying about Okinawa, the origin of karate, that's all verifiable, real stuff that they're just kind of dropping in as flavor.
Exactly. Yeah, the guy who developed this style of karate really was named Miyagi.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, Mr. Miyagi's name is a tribute to that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, because Robert Mark came in as a trained martial artist himself, right? I mean,
yeah.
That's why Jerry Weintraub brought him in, because Jerry Weintraub wrote this story in the news about a 9-year-old becoming a black belt and, getting his bullies to leave him alone.
Yeah.
And they knew Robert Mark Kamen could write such a picture. So Robert Mark Kamen translated that into a high school context in the Valley, despite having never been in the San Fernando Valley until he was asked to research this film. But at any rate, Daniel shows up to this party as a shower.
Yes.
And flirts with Allie, dances with Allie. They have great chemistry. And they talk about, what a pain it is that they have to deal with this crap with Johnny.
Yeah. Daniel gets nailed with an egg. It's a weird Halloween thing.
Was that a thing in the 80s that people dressed up as chickens and slammed eggs?
I don't know.
And others laughed at such a thing?
I don't know. I feel like this
jacked
is
up, right?
What is it with Chicken Kid? Is he like the kind of kid who's like just like starved for attention? He's like, I know, I'll show up to Halloween dance dressed as a chicken and just start throwing eggs at people.
God knows,
apropos of nothing.
I need to listen to the DVD special features again, because don't you know that Jerry Weintraub's like, put so and so's kid in the chicken suit, just to make sure that as many people as possible from Hollywood knew the Karate Kid was getting made. So, but because Daniel gets nailed, Allie convinces Daniel to open the shower curtain. And so, it's so silly, but it's a perfect metaphor. He opens the shower curtain, and then Chicken Guy plants an egg on his head.
Yes.
So he has to go into the bathroom to rinse off his hair.
Yeah, he's going to go clean up. It just so happens that while he's in there, some of the Cobra Kais are in there. Because Johnny's rolling joints for the whole gang.
Yeah. Well, of course, because as the alpha of the gang, Johnny's also the best joint roller.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess you don't get to be leader of the Cobra Kai just for nothing.
No.
Yeah, he's got to. This is the year. Remember, this is the year he turns it all around.
He's going to turn it all around. He's going to roll the best joints this year.
Johnny, it's already October. You got to get on this, my friend.
I know he's falling off the wagon.
So Johnny's rolling joints, and Daniel decides this is the perfect time to prank his rival.
Yeah.
By grabbing the hose, and
someone has helpfully left a hose attached to one of those old-fashioned work sinks in the bathroom that the kids are using.
Yeah. In a movie where someone learns karate, becomes a master of karate over the course of 3 months, this scene seems to strain credibility slightly more, because we've got Daniel in his full shower costume getup, able to somehow get the drop on Johnny.
Well, in fairness, Johnny is listening to his ever-present Walkman.
That's true. Johnny is jamming out.
Johnny's jamming out to his Walkman, rolling his joints, and Daniel gets in the next stall over.
It's that martial arts concentration that's allowing him.
Daniel suspends the hose and turns on the water and sprays Johnny. If I were Johnny, I would be pissed off, because, back then in the 80s, maybe weed wasn't that easy to get. Although, being a rich kid from the San Fernando Valley, I'm sure he had access to a bountiful supply.
Yeah. I think being rich in California in the 80s, I think you can get pretty much access to any drug you want, including loads of cocaine. But we won't talk about that until Karate Kid 3.
No.
So Johnny gets all wet because of Daniel's prank with the hose. And so Johnny gets so pissed that Daniel bolts out of the bathroom, nearly knocks over an ersatz Spider-Man. The rest of the Cobra Kais somehow have caught up to Johnny, and they are all going to chase him out of the gym.
They've been waiting for Johnny, and they all come running, and they're all dressed as skeletons.
Yes.
Which is
pretty terrifying.
Yeah, it's really terrifying. And so for me, for years, I always connoted skeleton suits with bullies.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. And so this is one of my favorite sound effects in the whole movie, which is that Daniel gives Allie a piece of his costume that was serving as the shower head. And Allie, it's like a part of a trombone or a trumpet. And Allie uses
it's like a hook.
Yeah, no, but she uses it as like a shepherd's crook.
Yeah.
And trips Johnny and the other Cobra Kais as they run past.
She gives them a real Midnight at the Apollo treatment. She does. She hooks them.
And then when they fall on the ground, the sound mixer throws in the sound of bones clattering.
Yes.
You can just faintly hear the sound of bones clattering, which is fantastic.
Yeah. They have some fun on this soundtrack. Daniel runs out into the parking lot, actually causes some people to wreck their cars. Bad form, Daniel. Not cool. Cobra Kai's chase after him, and apparently Daniel's apartment is close enough to the school for him to run there.
Well, he's been running we don't know how long
we don't know how long they've been running, but it's within running distance.
They chase him all the way to the lot beside his house, no matter how long they've been running.
Yeah.
At the speed of plot, they've been running.
They've been running at the speed of plot, but they've been running full tilt. They catch him at the gate to his apartment complex.
And kick the crap out of him.
They really take it to him in a serious way. Even the other Cobra Kais are like, Johnny, you've had enough. You should probably back off. Johnny's like,
no mercy, man.
Going full no mercy on these guys.
And we see in that shot too that Bobby, who's played by Ron Thomas, is his name.
Okay.
The real life martial artist. Bobby the Cobra Kai goes, "Leave him alone, man. He's had enough." Bobby is the most vocal defender of Daniel, and we see that Bobby has a conscience.
Leave him alone, man. He's had enough. All the sides when he's had enough, man. What is wrong with you, Johnny? The enemy deserves no mercy. Right.
Yes.
Bobby's the first Cobra Kai whose conscience we see. Mm-hmm. Yep. But the Cobra Kais, despite beating the tar out of Daniel, Johnny doesn't get to finish the job or do whatever he was really planning on doing because Mr. Miyagi appears in the corner.
Mr. Miyagi drops on them, not unlike Batman or Spider-Man. He jumps down from the gate. It's a little bit Pat Morita and a little bit
Fumio Demura.
Fumio Demura, the
Japanese martial artist.
As
a stunt double.
Yeah, his double who does a little bit of Miyagi stuff in this.
And even with high def on the big screen, the editing is seamless between the two.
It's a credit to the people who photographed this and Avison who managed to shoot it in such a way that even in high def, even on the big screen, there's plausible deniability that it's always Miyagi. Some movies you watch today on Blu-ray or high def and you see a stunt person. Yeah, some of the James Bond movies. Yeah,
don't even spoil that for me. I don't want to know.
Yeah.
That's just sad.
There's some stuff in Thunderball, but we won't worry about that
now. But Mr. Miyagi basically wails on the Cobra Kais, beats the pulp out of them, and as he carries Daniel off to save him, Daniel is of course knocked out and has just barely seen any of this. The Cobra Kais lay there on the ground twitching like beheaded cobras.
Yes,
it's pretty great. And I can just hear John Avildsen being like, "Now imagine a snake with its head cut off."
Yeah.
Anyway, and so then they get back to Mr. Miyagi's workshop, and Daniel, comes to find Mr. Miyagi dabbing his head with the same cloth that Mr. Miyagi used to tie around his head. Serving up tea, and Daniel realizes that Mr. Miyagi is the one who saved him, and Daniel's like,
"How come you didn't tell me?"
Tell you what?
That you do karate.
You never ask.
It's a very Luke realizes Yoda is Yoda moment.
Makes me think about the first time watching this in '84. It's like, how big a surprise would this have been?
Yeah.
Just not knowing anything going in. It would have been interesting to know. Mr. Miyagi gives the background of karate, and it all checks out. He might as well be reading us the Wikipedia article. There's a great line Daniel says, I thought it was from Buddhist temples.
Like Shaolin monks or
something.
Shaolin
monks, yeah. To which Mr. Miyagi says, "You've been watching too much TV." Well, good on you, Daniel, for watching that much TV, because I didn't even know where martial arts came from when I was watching martial arts movies as a teenager.
But Collin, the reason you didn't know is because you had that gap in your education. You hadn't seen The Karate Kid. If you'd seen The Karate Kid like the rest of America, you would have been like, "Oh, of course."
That's true. I should have been paying more attention.
Exactly. And so, I'm trying to figure out what, Mr. Miyagi serves Daniel tea. They're sitting there, and Daniel's like, can you help me?
Right. But this scene does a great job of really establishing Mr. Miyagi's boundaries as a pacifist, which is consistent with Miyagi style karate, which is created to be defense only.
Miyagi-Do from Okinawa is about you train, you beat the crap out of yourself in training, and you will have an aura or a vibe about you that keeps people from attacking you because you will be seen at, you will be an armed body.
Well, or if someone does attack you, you're
ready.
Your response will be almost automatic.
Yeah.
Which is something that we'll get to in a minute in the training sequences.
That's true. But the thing about this, and I feel like I'm only allowed 2 more Star Wars comparisons over the course of this recap episode, but this is really the moment Miyagi says the Miyagi equivalent of "Wars not make one great."
No such thing, bad student, only bad teacher. Teacher say, student do.
So Mr. Miyagi's like, they're being vicious, and that's not the way of karate, but they're being taught wrong.
And this is a great point, because the screenplay backs this up. In the scene we just saw, some of the Cobra Kais are like, "No, Johnny, he's had enough. Let him alone."
Yep.
And we'll see other flashes of this throughout the movie, as some of the Cobra Kais are not as resolute as Kreese is. Mm-hmm. It's really just Kreese driving these kids.
Kreese, the evil sensei.
Yeah.
We've seen foreshadowing of Kreese's philosophy in Johnny.
Yes.
Right now, from the point of view of the audience member seeing this for the first time, it looks like Johnny's just a sociopath. Like, he's just a jerk. Like, we've seen Kreese once yelling at the kids.
Right.
But we haven't, seen his cruelty on full display yet. yet. So
Right.
The other thing I want to say about this scene in which, Daniel realizes Mr. Miyagi's a karate master. Mr. Miyagi explains his philosophy and tells Daniel he doesn't want to get involved. And Daniel ultimately persuades Mr. Miyagi to help him.
Yes.
To go with him to the dojo and ask Kreese to have those boys lay off him. And the great thing about this scene is that they shot it all in one take. Ralph Macchio lying there, Pat Morita sitting there, all the action, the camera doesn't move or it barely shifts at all. They never cut to different angles. It's so natural, this sort of mono scene. It works so well with the more complex setups that they have.
Yes.
It's a moment where the audience's attention is totally arrested and in suspense as to what's going to happen next. I've seen this movie now I don't know how many times.
Right.
And I'm always in suspense when I see this scene.
Daniel makes a really good case for training him in karate because, Mr. Miyagi is all about, I don't want to interfere. And Daniel's point, which is completely correct, is...
You already interfered.
Yeah.
You
broke the prime directive, Captain Kirk.
Exactly.
You're done. You got to help now.
You beat the shit out of these guys, and now they're coming for me twice as hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of what you did.
Yeah. Miyagi agrees to help on a very conditional basis. He's just like, I will teach you how to train to do karate, but I'm going to do it my way.
That's right. And
Daniel understands.
Well, Daniel understands, but here's the other thing. Mr. Miyagi has been gently correcting Daniel on the pronunciation of his name. Mm-hmm. And then when he's like, all right, I'm going to help you, Daniel's like, oh, Mr. Miyagi, thank you. And he's like, Miyagi.
Miyagi.
He's done.
This is the first time he's corrected him,
No,
right?
he softly corrected him earlier in the scene.
Okay.
Miyagi. Understand problem perfect.
And Daniel's like, Miyagi. Okay.
Bonsai tree.
So, Daniel they now understand each other. They're on the same page. And so off they go to the dojo. We learn that Daniel doesn't yet have his driver's license. Mr. Miyagi has him drive the truck anyway. It's funny to see them becoming one through these odd little comic moments of trying to drive this broken truck.
Yeah, for sure.
And they arrive at the dojo.
We're literally going into the viper's nest.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And they walk in and stand and wait because they're a poster for the All Valley Under 18 Karate Championships that winter.
Yes.
Yes. And so they're standing under that poster waiting for the chance to talk to Kreese, who probably because he saw them there drops a kid and threatens him with violence for no reason. The trainer, Pat Johnson, who trained these guys all in doing karate, that move that Kreese did of dropping a guy randomly because he let his guard down, the Pat Johnson, the trainer, actually did that with Billy Zabka, who plays Johnny Lawrence. He threw him on the ground to be like, never turn your back.
Yeah, Pat Johnson got method with these kids.
Yeah, and so Martin Cove, who plays John Kreese, based his John Kreese on Pat Johnson.
Great. It creates this great dynamic between Pat Morita's Miyagi being very quiet, very reserved, versus Kreese, who Marty Cove plays.
He does go by Marty, right? Or do we just call him Marty in our hearts?
Look, the special features and interviews kind of switch back and forth. But yeah, so Cove, he is playing Kreese in such a performative way that he feels like a Will Ferrell character at times, where he's just like,
oh my God. Don't give SNL ideas. Funny or die. Oh my God.
But this is one of the best moments in the movie. Kreese is threatening Miyagi.
Will Ferrell versus Dr. Ken.
Yeah, and he's like,
you're a pushy little bastard, ain't you? But I like that. I like that.
Yeah, it's
the reason that John Kreese says that Mr. Miyagi is a pushy little bastard is because Mr. Miyagi is like, listen, stop beating up on this kid. Your dojo has too much. And Kreese is like, let's go here, and Mr. Miyagi is like, your dojo has too much advantage.
Yeah, Kreese wants to settle it right then and there.
Exactly.
Miyagi is, of course, being more reserved. We'll settle this if you want to settle this, but we'll
do it on neutral ground.
We'll do it on much like the Highlanders. They have to go.
There can only be one.
Yeah, exactly. There can only be one, and they have to do it on sacred ground. Yeah. They agreed to do it at the All Valley Under 18 Karate Tournament. Smart move on Miyagi's part.
Which is less than 2 months away at this point. They have 6 weeks to train.
And that's the genius of this movie is it does a great job of not straining credibility too much. Like, it establishes that Daniel is somewhat athletic. The movie wants to establish that at least going in, Daniel has some
facility, some faculty to do this.
Faculty to do this. He's not like magically learning this stuff overnight.
He's just a
even though he learns
kid.
most of it overnight.
Yeah, I mean, he's not like the Aryan army that John Kreese is raising.
He's not like Ivan Drago training in the swimming pool, like, you know.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I want to say this because we just saw this on the screen and it's so beautifully shot. They shot almost the entire film in rehearsals before, and you can tell that all that hard work that they put in allowed Avildsen to shoot it in such a way that on the screen you can see the point of view of all the major characters, including Billy Zabka as Johnny.
Yeah.
You can see all the vulnerability and anger and rage and then amusement flash across Johnny's face.
Oh, yeah.
As he's listening to his sensei, his evil sensei, you know, he's listening to what his fate's going to be, right? Because obviously he's the standard bearer of Cobra Kai. And they go, and this is my favorite moment. Well, I don't know if it's my favorite moment in the whole movie, but like this is of them going to the ashram. Mr. Miyagi brings Daniel what appears to be his house, and they get there. Daniel says, "Where are we going? Where do you live?" And Mr. Miyagi goes, "On the other side of the tracks." And it's literally on the other side of a railroad track.
That is true.
In an area that looks like it's, you know, an industrial area. You know, he happens to own just a little tract that is next to train tracks. It looks like an old oil well. So, you know, very much, you know, the valley, which is, you know, an old oil economy. As a member of a racial ethnic minority in a lower income area, this makes perfect sense that this is where Mr. Miyagi's house would be.
Absolutely.
The actual location for this house, it's not standing anymore, but it was in like Canoga Park, not far from Encino or Reseda, where the rest of the movie is set.
He's pulling Daniel up. We get to see his house, some huge agaves, kind of a fading paint job, a bunch of classic cars, like 4 parked.
4 or 5.
Well,
yeah.
5 including his truck.
Yeah, his old
which
truck.
Which is also just a beautiful classic car.
Yeah.
So apparently Mr. Miyagi living his very best life.
Basically, but at this point, you know, they roll in and Daniel is in the antechamber of the temple, as it were, right? Like he's preparing. You know, Mr. Miyagi's like, all right, now we're gonna make this sacred pact, and Daniel's like, oh wait, I was gonna give you your Tinugui back. Miyagi's like, no, you keep it. And he's like, we're gonna make this sacred pact. I'm gonna tie this around your head. And he's like, but you need to know, and this is the other Yodaism that I wanted to invoke.
Walk on the road. Walk right side, safe. Walk left side, safe. Walk middle. Sooner or later, get the squish, just like grape.
Do or do not, there is no try.
Yes.
Daniel's like, all right, I understand. And Mr. Miyagi, you know, like cinches the Tinugui around Daniel's head. Now Daniel is the acolyte. And Mr. Miyagi, Daniel stands up to shake Mr. Miyagi's hand, and into his hand, Mr. Miyagi puts
a sponge.
A sponge, because it's time to wash all the cars and then wax them.
Wax on, wax off. Breathe in, breathe out.
Using a circular motion.
To which Daniel's like, what?
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
And the first car that Daniel's going to clean is going to be this 1948 Ford Super Deluxe Club convertible.
Yeah.
For 5-year-old Jenny, this was the coolest car on planet Earth.
It's a cool car. Not to harp too much on other 80s movies, but 80s was like the era of the cool car.
Classic car made cool.
Every show, every movie had to have a cool car, whether it was a Back to the Future DeLorean or an A-Team van.
Yeah.
Like, every show had to have the car. And I guess for Karate Kid, this Super Deluxe is the car.
It is the car. But we don't know that yet because Daniel's just like, wow, this car. Mr. Miyagi sees Daniel looking at the car. Daniel's going to have to wash and wax all the cars. You put the wax on this way, you take the wax off this way. And Daniel's like, all right. You know, Mr. Miyagi's like demonstrating. And that's his first task.
Daniel gives him some back talk, but Mr. Miyagi is like, look, if you're doing this, you're not asking me any questions. You're just doing what I'm telling you. Playing it very aloof, very mysterious. If you're watching this the first week in the theater, you got to be thinking to yourself, does Mr. Miyagi even know what he's doing? Is he tooling Daniel? Like, how much do you think
I can answer
is this
that
a red
question
herring or not?
From the perspective of a 9-year-old, because my dear friend Meg's son Simon recently saw this movie for the first time.
Yeah.
And the minute Mr. Miyagi handed him the sponge and was like, do it this way, Simon was like, oh, all these things are going to show him how to do karate.
Okay, so the movie is telegraphing it pretty much, right? I mean, that's what I thought too, but I mean, it helps to kind of go back and look at these things fresh.
Well, we don't know. I mean, that's the deal. Like, we don't know where this is going. We just know that this is all that Daniel can do.
Yeah.
And also, like, at this point, you know, they're pretty simpatico, but we don't know if Mr. Miyagi's just extracting pay from Daniel for the lessons he'll eventually get. And there's a moment I would like to mention also here, which is that Daniel comes in to tell Mr. Miyagi he's done, and I believe this is the first time we see the inside
hours later,
hours later. The first time we see the inside of Mr. Miyagi's house. And Mr. Miyagi is kneeling at his shrine, Mr. Miyagi's Shinto. He's kneeling at the Shinto shrine in his home, and he's asleep while kneeling up. And Daniel just walks in and is like, Mr. Miyagi, I'm done. And Mr. Miyagi's passed out. And Daniel's just like, ugh, and turns around. I remember as a kid being really mystified by that. Like, really being like, whoa, what is that guy doing? Is he meditating? Like, I had an aunt who was Buddhist. And so I was like, maybe he's chanting. That's his form of chanting. Like, I couldn't figure out what was going on. But no, he's asleep. And so what do you think? That Mr. Miyagi's vulnerable? Or what does that do for us there?
The movie does a great job of painting Mr. Miyagi as aloof, mysterious, maybe a bit of a weirdo, but he's not a cartoon stereotype. He speaks broken English, but also he's first generation. They're doing it for very specific reasons to set it up that he fought in the war.
I think he's not even first generation. He's the immigrant.
Yeah, children are first generation. Okay.
Yeah, Pat Morita chose this dialect, or he appropriated it in this way, and he based Mr. Miyagi on people that he knew once he arrived in internment camps.
Yeah, again, so, it's all coming from a very honest place.
Exactly. But so his depiction of Mr. Miyagi in this way, and the way that they've written Mr. Miyagi as like falling asleep in these moments of Mr. Miyagi, I guess it's foreshadowing of a greater vulnerability that we're going to learn about with Mr. Miyagi. Daniel bails. We see now that Daniel's really cocky at high school because the Cobra Kais can't touch him.
Now that we're in this detente with the Cobra Kais, Daniel kind of falls back into his wise guy pattern and starts sassing the Cobra Kais, knowing that they can't get back at him until the tournament.
Yeah, he like asks Allie out in front of him.
Yeah.
He like gigs them. Basically. Meanwhile, now he's free to go out with her without being afraid of getting his ass kicked. She's like, pick me up. And so he rolls into her house in the Encino Hills with his mom driving.
Daniel and his mom, they only have one car, and it's not a great car.
No. It's a big green station wagon, and they have to roll it to get it to go. And stick shift. And so
his mom is there.
And it's already fraught because his mom, he doesn't have a license. His mom has to drive him. And they roll in, he goes up, rings the doorbell. She answers the door, and he's like, I think you have company. And she's like, oh, no, those are my parents who are like pulling up in a Mercedes or a BMW.
Her parents are pulling up right at that moment.
Yeah.
They've clearly just come from tennis.
Yeah, they've come from tennis.
Yes, 80s tennis. That all checks out.
And then her parents come up and are, quizzing him on where he's from. And he kicks at the little flower bed wall. And as he does that, a brick comes loose.
Hi, I guess we're going to golf instead.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, since John Avildsen does have that sort of tacit socialism of Frank Capra, like he's like, I'm going to kick it and show this brick coming loose that not everything is as it seems, right? One of the things Mr. Miyagi says multiple times in this movie is not everything is as it seems.
Yeah, well, then it gets driven home because then there's like this weird little moment where Allie's dad is like,
Oh, don't worry about that. I thought you were going to have that fixed.
I am. I was. I will.
And you're like, whoa. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
not all that glitters, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We don't really get too many flashes of that. Giving these little breadcrumbs.
It's so great the way that Elizabeth Shue plays Allie. Because, Elizabeth Shue happily helps Mrs. LaRusso get the car to start because, of course, the car doesn't work. And on the big screen, you can see Daniel's face when the car won't start, and that it's just mortifying.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth Shue is more than happy to help them get the car started.
Yeah, she's like super game for all of this.
Yeah, she's game, she's smart, like she gets it.
Yeah.
And they go out, and
Allie wants to hit the golf and stuff.
Do they actually play golf though, or am I wrong? No, they do, right?
They play mini golf, yeah.
And they play air hockey, or not air hockey, what's it called?
It's just like
foosball. And there are many happy montage shots of them giggling and taking photo with pictures.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a gamer, this is prime 80s arcade. We got all the classics.
And golf and stuff is still there.
If you're in California,
still there.
Hit the golf and stuff.
But, they've had this wonderful evening, and it's about time for his mom to pick them up. And again, we see Daniel's insecurity, right? First, a hot guy in a Corvette rolls up and asks Allie if she wants a ride. And she's like, no, Eddie, this is Daniel. And then a red convertible full of Cobra Kais, and Allie's friends pulls up.
Yes.
And we can see Johnny, like, wickedly they make fun of her car.
Yeah. Eddie the Corvette guy, I just wanted to back up because he literally says, "Hey, good looking." Like, he's practically Mr. Microphone.
He is Mr. Microphone.
Yeah.
Hey, good looking. We'll be back to pick you up later.
Johnny and the rest of them pulls up in another crazy classic car, like
this red car that is a DeLorean of convertibles.
Yes,
and full of everyone that Allie has associated with except Daniel. And they're like, "Come on, you guys can take a ride." She's like, "No thanks, no thanks." And then Johnny's like, Daniel can ask his mommy. And Daniel's mom, being the over-the-top happy lady that she's like, "Hey, kids." And the kids are like, "We love your car, Miss LaRusso." Oh, it's so awful. Like, I've so been there. I've so heard people make fun of other kids' parents' cars. And it's like the worst thing in the world. It's so triggering. Like, I have to avert my eyes during these scenes.
No. I mean, it's just like,
God.
Well, I think everybody's had this interaction when they're like kids or when they're teenagers where kids are clearly tooling with Daniel. His mom either just doesn't get it or doesn't care or both. And she's just like, "Hey, kids, I'm here to pick Daniel up."
So at least the car ran and didn't break.
Yeah, at least it was running at the time.
But we see that Daniel has not yet learned his emotional honesty bit.
True.
Because he's like, he could have gone with them.
That would have been interesting, but what does this movie look like if we do that extra scene of Daniel, like, actually going with them? Like, then we have all this bunch of, like, passive-aggressive stuff with Daniel and Johnny.
Don't worry, there's a fanfic out there that explains that, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm positive.
No doubt.
You've read it
I'm sure
already,
that hijinks ensue of the /fic variety. Yeah, that's another episode.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that scene is that it really drives home, like, that whole sequence that this is about class. Right, yes. Daniel's insecure. He comes from this bare bones Spartan apartment with a pool that doesn't even have water in it.
Yeah,
he's got no money. His mom is now hostessing at a restaurant instead of working for a computer company.
Mm-hmm.
So they're scraping by. He doesn't have a car. He doesn't even have a driver's license. He feels like he's less than. He's internalizing the bullshit class politics of the rich people of the hills. He hasn't yet learned that lesson that Mr. Miyagi said, which is, if come from inside you, it's good enough. His insecurity's on display. I guess we're gonna hit pause on that relationship for now.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're back at Mr. Miyagi's yard. Daniel is there with his tenugui around his head. The way actually it's around his neck, and he like rolls in on his bike.
Yeah.
And Mr. Miyagi's like,
you much humor.
What are these?
Japanese sanda.
So we sand the floor.
Yes, he wants his whole deck sanded.
Sanded.
That's pretty much an all-day job and then some.
And then Daniel gets done and he's like, "Come back tomorrow." And Daniel's like, "That's it?" And then,
are you kidding me?
Tomorrow, Daniel rolls in and Mr. Miyagi's there catching the fly with chopsticks. And to our surprise and shock, that was not any kind of animation. They actually had a dude. They had flies. They had real flies. They had like fuzz, I think, on a string. They had a person who was there to wrangle flies. Like, they kept the flies in the freezer for a while to slow them down.
I can't imagine that any of that worked. Like, I mean, I'm sure they tried it, but it's like,
what was that development meeting like? These flies have a lot of writers in their contracts.
This is old school, like, classic filmmaking.
They're very method flies.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like nobody has conceived of this in a movie before.
Yeah.
And obviously, this is an age before CGI. This is an age of practical effects, and it's like, well, maybe we could, like, that would have been interesting to be a fly on the wall, as it were, during that production meeting.
Wow.
Of being like,
or on the stick.
Yeah. Maybe we get real flies. Maybe. I don't know. Like,
I wish Robert Mark Kamen could explain to me if that's something that his Japanese or Okinawan karate master also taught him.
Uh-huh.
Because as Mr. Miyagi says,
man who catch fly with chopstick accomplish anything.
And
Daniel does.
Guess what? Daniel does.
Yeah, that's when Grumpy Miyagi comes out.
You beginner luck.
It may be beginner's luck, or maybe he's just fast as hell.
See, I don't know. I think Daniel's fast. But I don't think they're trying to make Daniel special. I think what they're trying to do, that scene is not just about that Daniel can catch the fly. It's about how Daniel reacts to catching the fly. Yeah. And we see that Daniel's this super tough guy, that he's trying really hard. He's fronting, for Allie, even though they have a genuine connection. And then when he catches that fly, Ralph Macchio's voice goes up an octave. And he's just beside himself. And we see that inside Daniel is a kid. He's just a kid. And it's adorable.
For sure.
Is that an Okinawan habit? I don't know. Yeah. But now it's time to paint the fence.
So we get some business where Miyagi's teaching Daniel to paint the fence. He wants him to do it a very specific way. We may or may not be clued in on the fact that Miyagi's messing with Daniel a bit, but it's all for a greater purpose, right?
It is.
The other thing is, like, during all these sequences, Miyagi seems to have something better to do.
Yeah,
at
Miyagi
every
leaves
single
Daniel there
moment.
painting.
Yeah.
He leaves in there. This time he's like super dapper in a Hawaiian
Yeah, he's
shirt.
got like a cap and a Hawaiian shirt on.
And he like walks off humming to himself.
Yeah.
He's heading to the VA, obviously.
He's either got a VA or maybe a hot date, maybe both. Who knows?
Oh, who knows with Mr. Miyagi?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe he's going to see a man about a bonsai tree.
Bonsai tree.
Very
possible. But the next morning, you know, Daniel's like, okay, I finished the fence. He comes back. Now he finds nothing but a pile of paint cans, a brush, and an adorable note with an animation of a house with a chimney and a puff of smoke saying "Paint house side to side." So by the time that Mr. Miyagi gets home, you know, Ralph Macchio is good and sore. He's like angry, literally. His dominant arm is sore, and he's mad as hell at Mr. Miyagi.
But Miyagi's like, not everything is as it seems.
Not everything is as it seems.
This is great screenwriting. This is probably the third or fourth beat of Miyagi saying explicitly, not everything is as it seems. That does kind of plant the seeds, like you were saying, these cues, whether consciously or subconsciously, the movie is telling us, not everything is as it seems. And he's teaching Daniel karate his way, and possibly one of the best scenes in all movies anywhere is this final beat of wax on, wax off.
At the moment at which Mr. Miyagi reveals to Daniel that he's been training for karate this whole time because he's synthesized all the defense moves.
Yeah, like
so he can instantly defend based upon the muscle memory that Mr. Miyagi has had him cultivate.
Daniel's still being, you know, doubtful. Like Mr. Miyagi walks him through this defense drill, basically.
I mean, it's ironic that we're even describing this, because if anyone's listening to this podcast, they know what we're talking about. And
if you just know the culture, like, you know, like, wax on, wax off, Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi, the whole thing,
but the scene is so... It's beautiful and mysterious, and yet, like, so obvious. And it's such a great lesson.
Oh, for sure.
Like, I don't mind doing a lot of other tasks that normally annoy me after I've watched The Karate Kid, because I'm like, you know what? This is building to something I don't yet understand.
Yes.
And also fantastic is Mr. Miyagi's chiropractic ability, because of his cool hand trick that he can just, like, repair Daniel's hurt shoulder and arm. They rehearse the fight scenes most of all, but they've rehearsed all this, and yet they sell it like it's the first time it ever happened to these actors.
I think this is probably our second act turn at this point, where Mr. Miyagi reveals to Daniel, hey, listen up. You've been learning karate this whole time. You just never knew it. And then Daniel's face when he makes that connection in his brain. Holy crap, I just learned karate.
And Pat Morita in this sequence is amazing. It's a beautiful moment where he is always like, at Daniel, because Daniel is not understanding yet. He still doesn't get it and still doesn't get it. And then once Daniel gets it, he stops being so gruff with him. They bow and he's like,
hey, look, I always look, I.
And his face is beatific and
I
serious.
think we should talk for a second about how Weintraub did not want Morita, because prior to this, Pat Morita was not known for any sort of dramatic acting. He's known primarily as a comedian, probably mostly from Happy Days.
Yeah, but also Jerry Weintraub used to book him in the Catskills back in the day, and his stage name was literally an ethnic slur. And he wore his glasses upside down. And Pat Morita's life is really interesting. Like, he had a job and all this, and he dropped out to become a stand-up. But, like, he had been seen as either Arnold or, like, the drunk stand-up. But he, like, knew this character.
And, you know, I think we've all kind of been in those moments where it's like, no, I'm being serious right now.
Yeah.
And you should pay attention.
Yeah.
And in a way, Mr. Miyagi is grabbing the audience at the same time that he's grabbing Daniel. And then we cut to the beach.
The beach! This is such a great scene. It's sold with that beautiful Baroque music Bill Conti wrote.
Well, I mean, Bill Conti composed all the orchestral stuff. He got Zamfir on the pan flute to do these, you know, vaguely Asian-inspired flute solos that kind of underscore a lot of the training sequences and a lot of the Miyagi sequences. It works perfectly. Bill Conti, of course, also known for the Rocky music. The similarities are pretty apparent to anybody who's seen both movie series.
So, you know, Mr. Miyagi's like, go to the waves, make kick, learn balance, like stand against these heavy Pacific waves. And Daniel is just like standing there with the waves rolling over him, and he keeps getting up and trying to kick.
Well, filming stuff in the golden hour and in the evening against the ocean, which is basically reflecting all of the sunlight just directly back into the camera, to get those stops right and Daniel silhouetted on the ocean with just the right amount of light to make it look like a a silhouette standing against this shimmering field.
Ace work.
I can't even conceive of how a director of photography puts that together, but bravo.
Yeah, and the thing about it is also that the way they shoot it at that hour, at that moment, it allows Daniel to squint and sort of see Mr. Miyagi like a mirage in the distance doing the crane technique on the post.
This is our first flash of the crane technique.
The line of posts in the water, and as someone who grew up with this movie and everyone else who knows what I'm talking about, the minute you hear the hint of the dun 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 theme of the crane technique, you feel like the Manchurian Candidate, and you're activated and compelled to stand and do the crane technique yourself as all the hair rises on your skin. I mean, the goosebumps is amazing, and it's just this guy in the distance, and until I was 37 years old, I didn't really. I mean, I knew that it wasn't Pat Morita on that stump, but I still believe it's Mr. Miyagi out there. Of course, it's not a real technique, right? They made up this idea,
right?
But it doesn't matter that it's not real because
it's one of the few things created whole cloth for the movie, but it still
probably
works
based
so well because the rest of the world is so grounded.
Probably based on the white crane kata from Miyagi-Do, real Okinawan karate, but which is a different technique, a different move.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
I think you bring up a great point because it's like this perfect synthesis of music and photography and story and performance coming together and just creating these perfect little moments again and again and again.
Yep. And they roll in, Daniel's like, oh my gosh, what is that? And he's like, oh, my father taught me. Daniel's like, can you teach me? And he's like, first you have to learn all these other things. No one can defend against this technique.
I think
ironclad.
I think that's a great thing that they drop in. It's a technique we created whole cloth for this movie, and also it's the ultimate technique. It's not quite Dragon Ball Z level stuff, but it's close. It's like, if you master it, no way to defend against it.
They're coming up, and this always really bothered me as a kid because I didn't know that there are two dudes drinking beer, and they've laid out all these bottles of beer on top of the wheel, and the more aggressive older guy says a slur to Mr. Miyagi and basically says, hey, look, it's a kid who has his very own pet Asian. What does your pet Asian do?
Right.
And the guys are mean, and so Mr. Miyagi karate chops the tops off their bottles. And, they hurriedly move the bottles. And, it's interesting how they've chosen to weave the racism in this one, also in Karate Kids 2 and 3.
Yeah, it gets a little less subtle and a little more explicit, especially by 3.
Yeah, but even in this one, this guy was like a cartoon villain. Like, he looked like a Popeye villain.
This racist being played by Larry Drake, who he was Dark Man, and he's kind of all over a bunch of 80s movies.
I really think when I see it, like, that's important to see, and it really puts it's very timely. But what's really amazing is how Mr. Miyagi deals with it. Like, Mr. Miyagi's like, oh, you're just a dick. Okay, well, I guess I'll just karate chop your bottles. Like, I'm not going to even change you. Like, we're moving on. Like, I'm a pacifist, but that's just the way this is. It's really interesting to see that come up now. Mr. Miyagi, it will use his ability to inflict violence, but never to hurt the person, just to get the obstacle out of the way.
And the brighter spot of the scene is Daniel asking Miyagi, how did you do that? How did you break the bottle without moving the bottle? And Miyagi is being like, I don't know, it was my first time. He's a master of karate, but has never had a opportunity to use it. For Miyagi, that was his catch the fly moment.
And I'm sure being Mr. Miyagi, he has a prime, Asian liniment at home that he can put on his arm or on his hand to heal it if it hurts from breaking those bottles.
Exactly.
Daniel, as time passes, makes a date with Allie. They're going to go back to golf and stuff to get on the water slide, and she's like, pick me up from the Encino Hills Country Club at like 9:30.
Yeah, because once you've had a taste of that golf and stuff, that's all you want.
Yep. This show does an interesting job tonally, like shifting back and forth between the Miyagi moments and the high school moments. And, if the characters weren't so grounded, it would be weird tonally. But because they're so grounded and they're so consistent, it makes perfect sense. Every afternoon or every morning, depending on what day it is, Daniel's out there training with Mr. Miyagi. And so, boom, we're right back at the reservoir. They're fishing. Mr. Miyagi is having Daniel stand on the bow of don't bow to me. I mean, get on the bow of the boat, of the fishing boat. And Daniel's practicing various defensive moves. Yeah. And Mr. Miyagi explains his hatred of fighting. Yeah. Right? Which Daniel's like baffled by at first.
Yes. Daniel's showing that he gets it, because by the end of the scene, Daniel himself admits, I'm learning karate so that I don't have to use it. And he specifically says that, and Miyagi's like, great. You're getting it. And if you get that, there's hope for you yet. It's a great scene.
And that's why Mr. Miyagi decides that he can have a little fun and rock the boat so that Daniel falls
Yes.
and gets wet.
Yeah. And yeah.
We see that Mr. Miyagi's a little bit of an anarchist at heart.
And man, he is in love with his own jokes as well.
Yeah, he loves his
He's
own
one of
jokes.
those guys who's just like, is fair because it's like...
I mean,
you've seen
I
him
think
go
the
to
deal is
VA.
that he's being Daniel's dad, right? Dads are weird. They make dumb jokes.
That's
They
true.
play pranks, especially on sons, right? You know, gender politics in society. It's like, so that's awesome. And
Yes.
Daniel's just like, you're crazy. And he's being more than a dad because that's the beauty of the teacher-student relationship.
So now it's time for the date.
Yeah. Daniel has now learned that he's really learning not to fight. He's learning to be able to defend against fighting. Fighting is always a last resort. And they cut to the Encino Hills Country Club where Allie is running late because she's dancing with her dad, because this is apparently a country club where they play the old classic standard Fascination.
It's
Or-
practically Lawrence Welk.
It is Turn Off the Bubble Machine. Here we are.
Thank you so much for all that applause. Next, another song made famous by Nat King Cole.
And we see Allie's parents are classist monsters because she's dancing with her dad, and she's like, Dad, I have to leave, I'm running late. And he's like, oh, it's not with that boy from Reseda, is it?
Yes.
And by this point, Johnny Lawrence has already spotted Allie and has started dancing with Allie's mom so he can cut in. And God, I mean, Billy Zabka plays Johnny with a lot of nuance, but in this scene, he's just a straight up villain. Like, he's just a jerk.
He's slimy all over the place.
He's so slimy. He's Eddie Haskelling her mom. Charming. It's just, come on. And
this is probably one of the broadest scenes in the movie because...
As in painted with a real broad brush. Like, no gray in this scene at all.
No. So we've got Allie's parents just being villains from a Rodney Dangerfield movie. Where it's like, oh, that boy from Reseda. And then we've got Billy Zabka.
I mean, her dad is
like,
basically Taster's Choice guy.
Taster's Choice. Just in time.
Billy Zabka being the slimiest he's been in the movie.
Johnny's seeing Daniel through the window.
They make eye
At this point, Allie has run so late that Daniel has snuck into the country club through the service entrance. And, and at first I was like, oh my God, he's internalized the classism so that he won't even use the front door. But the truth is you probably have to be a member to get in. Like,
yes, conveniently, Daniel is dressed in all white and like a track jacket, so he does kind of blend in.
He
with
looked
the
like he could be a runner or a server of some kind. And so he comes in through the kitchen and he's peering through the window in the kitchen door into the dining and dancing area. And Johnny spots him first. And so Johnny decides to fake necking with Allie. Like he sexually assaults her to a certain degree.
Yeah. No consent. Not
no.
true.
And Daniel turns to flee at that moment. Allie's like, get off me. And then crash, boom, bang. In his rush to get away, Daniel, thinking that Johnny and Allie are actually doing it on the side, runs into a chef.
In his moment of emotional revulsion, Daniel knocks. We don't really see the impact, but we see the result, which
aftermath.
Is Daniel and this poor waiter sliding along the floor, like covered with spaghetti, like it's Eviscera from a Friday the 13th movie.
And at this moment, we also see the moment where ethnic and class disparity, overlap and produce a sort of moment of racialized bigotry or racialized mocking, because Daniel, the Italian kid, is covered in spaghetti. Covered in pasta sauce, and all these rich folks at the country club are laughing at him.
Everybody in the dining room drops what they're doing to specifically laugh, presumably at Daniel, maybe a little bit at the waiter too. It plays like a nightmare from any teenager's dream, where it's like, oh, I'm covered with spaghetti. They're all laughing at me.
This is if Avildsen is Frank Capra's biggest fan, then this is Avildsen's arsenic and old lace moment. But Allie, clocks Johnny.
Yes.
Which is fantastic.
Yes.
And extremely rewarding.
Yes.
Daniel's like, I gotta get out of here. So where's he gonna go?
He goes right back to Mr. Miyagi.
Because it's a safe space. And Daniel arrives covered in pasta sauce.
Yes.
And, the first clue that things are not right is that Mr. Miyagi is sitting, pouring a drink for a photo in a frame and a drink for himself.
Yeah.
And it's like, it looks like whiskey or bourbon. And Daniel walks in, and Mr. Miyagi's drunk, slurring, and doesn't even notice that Daniel's covered in pasta sauce, which Mr. Miyagi would have instantly noticed on any other day.
I'm sure he would have.
And Daniel, is like, what are we drinking to? And Daniel clearly has never had much alcohol at all, if any.
Right.
And Mr. Miyagi just says anniversary.
Yes.
And it's very nebulous.
Yes.
What's going on?
Yes. They toast the picture of his wife.
Who Mr. Miyagi first saw in the cane fields of Hawaii.
Yes.
Beautiful, and a damn good cane cutter, too.
Mr. Miyagi is like,
Banzai!
To baby trees.
Ah, bonsai. Banzai!
Banzai.
Banzai!
bonsai different from bonsai.
Yeah, and then Mr. Miyagi slips into talking about military orders and shooting Germans, and he's from World War II. This is where we learn Mr. Miyagi's a war vet. He's sitting there drinking. Daniel's drinking. Mr. Miyagi's drunkenly laughing as Daniel coughs from the booze, and we see that it's not just that he's drinking. He's not okay.
Yeah,
he gets up and begins orating drunkenly in the voice of a troop commander.
Yes.
And, he starts, yelling, Sergeant Miyagi, go do this. Go kill the Germans.
Yes.
And then it's, Sergeant Miyagi, we regret to inform you.
Yeah.
And they regretted to inform him that his wife and baby son died in childbirth. Somehow in this moment, Daniel starts sifting through newspapers that are on the table. And this is a really important moment because we see, and as a child, I didn't understand this at all, that these newspapers convey that Mr. Miyagi's family were all interned. And Mr. Miyagi was part of a group of people who enlisted despite, the racism and prejudice against them to show, we support the United States. This is what we do. This is what we believe. And, valiantly left his pregnant wife and she died. Just a shout out to Pat Morita. Pat Morita knew firsthand about internment camps, right?
Oh, yeah,
this
for
is
sure.
the first time, a lot of people say this, I don't, at least the first mainstream movie that actually dealt with the question of internment camps. And Pat Morita himself had I think he broke his spine, and then he got spinal tuberculosis and was in and out of body casts in hospitals for 9 years, being treated by white doctors as a kid, and then was sent to go live with his family in, I want to say Arizona, Northern California. He had an outsider's perspective coming in while also being raised Japanese at this moment where they were seen as the enemy. So he had a particular view to these men who had lost everything. And that's what made him so committed to this part and this way at that and that scene. It would have also been an enormous loss for the movie, but for pop culture, for that not to be included.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And so it's very likely that what he's distraught about is not the anniversary of his marriage, but the anniversary of her death. I'm looking at Daniel holding the telegram, and, that's been crumpled up in Mr. Miyagi's hand this whole time.
Yeah, Miyagi passes out, and Daniel takes a moment to kind of to tuck Miyagi in. It's very...
very sweet.
Very loving. It's very nice.
And now he sees the box of curios that Mr. Miyagi had pulled that from. And there's...
a patch with
there's
the
this
bonsai
beautiful
tree on
patch
it.
with the bonsai tree at sunset. And then also a Medal of Valor.
Yes.
That Mr. Miyagi has received for being in the 442nd Regiment.
So not only did he do something difficult, but he was highly decorated for it.
Yeah, he's a hero.
Much of the 442nd.
He's a war hero. And so Daniel now, has this new respect for Mr. Miyagi, blows out the candle beside Mr. Miyagi's bed, and then prepares to leave. But before leaving, make sure to turn and bow, even though Mr. Miyagi can't see him. He turns and bows to Mr. Miyagi.
Which is something that came up with on set, yeah?
Yeah, because John Avildsen was just like, oh yeah, Ralph, while you're doing that, then bow.
Yeah.
And this is Ralph Macchio's favorite part because you see it, he bows and then they instantly cut to another beautifully scored sequence where now Daniel LaRusso has decided to go stand on the post as the tide comes in.
Daniel's
sunset.
doing some solo training.
He's trying to learn the crane kick himself. He's now not just about Daniel, it's about Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah, Daniel's full in at this point.
This montage is beautiful. I mean, he's standing there on the bow of it and he's doing his defense moves.
Yeah.
And, he's taking the time when Mr. Miyagi's working to go do his thing, without Mr. Miyagi prodding him.
Yeah.
I can't imagine this training montage without that scene with Mr. Miyagi drunk.
Right.
And that scene was almost pulled from the movie.
Yes.
Someone in the editing room did not want that scene to stay.
Yeah, they talked about this in interviews and in the commentary in a couple other places where it's some editor suggested they pull the Miyagi scene.
Miyagi drunk scene, yeah.
The Miyagi drunk scene. And trying to think how the movie flows without it, it's all right, but it's not great. The scene before it is Daniel gets humiliated. Then the scene after it is Daniel comes back and is he's doubled down on his dedication to his training, right?
Exactly.
And it's like, you could go straight from the humiliation to the double down on the training, and that would be okay. Putting that Miyagi scene was totally the right call, because it brings this movie to this quiet nadir, and then bang, we come right back with the training, and he's got a new resolve. I don't know how Johnny Lawrence is doing. This is the year I come back, but clearly Daniel's got him beat on that as well.
Daniel is dead serious about this because he knows it's greater than him, what he's part of. And in lots of beautiful shots in this training montage, and then a segue to him learning to punch with Mr. Miyagi and the baseball and the, what is it, the umpire... The catcher's
He's wearing like an umpire catching
guard thing,
which he's clearly painted a target on himself, which Daniel, I thought was a nice touch.
It's just perfect.
Yeah, and again, they're shooting this at golden hour. Like the sun is behind them, just over the hills.
Yeah,
and they've got it lens flared a little bit to where it's like beams are shooting out from the sun.
Yeah.
And the sun also reflecting off the lake. Yet Daniel and Mr. Miyagi are still nicely lit and in focus. So they've got it worked out to where the sun is in the shot, but it's not blowing out everything else that would be in the frame. Like if you're shooting it with your iPhone or some cheap stuff like that. Like they have got this filtered so perfectly that everything is clear. Everything is crisp. It's a beautiful shot.
It's so amazing. It's great because like you can see that Daniel's still like the eager young pup, Mr. Miyagi, because he's excited that he's getting to learn to punch finally.
Yes.
And Mr. Miyagi is like, no, you got to focus power. Like, come on, man. Like, get it straight. And Mr. Miyagi like trips Daniel, brings him to the ground, chops him.
Dresses him down a little bit.
He does dress him down. I mean, Daniel being a sponge soaks that move up and uses it later.
That's true.
And it's just a beautiful, beautiful sequence. And then and then from that we go then to Daniel's birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
Daniel's birthday party.
That Mr. Miyagi has thrown him.
Yes.
Mr. Miyagi is wearing a dapper Hawaiian shirt with a party hat.
Yes.
Bringing him a cake and singing.
Yeah.
And he has presents for Daniel. Mm-hmm. And the first present is the Miyagi-Do gi.
Yes.
He's gotten Daniel a gi and transferred the bonsai and sun.
The patch is on the back of the gi. So if you cut the earlier scene, that really blunts the impact of this scene and the significance of the gi and everything. So I don't see how you lose the earlier scene and still do this scene.
Yeah, Daniel's like super excited. He's putting on his gi, and you know he's like, "Who made this? Who made this patch anywhere? Where did you get this?" And he's like,
"Mrs. Miyagi make long time ago."
Mm-hmm. And Daniel realizes the weight of that.
Right.
What, the gift, the Mr. Miyagi has so little of his wife, the gift that he's giving Daniel, and Daniel goes,
"Hey, you know, if you ever want this patch back, I'll understand."
I know you understand.
That's probably the best Miyagi line in the movie.
Yes.
Like that is Mr. Miyagi's counterpart to the "You're the best friend I ever had." Mr. Miyagi just looks at Daniel and says, "I know you understand."
I know you understand. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mr. Miyagi has processed his grief. He's not ashamed that Daniel saw him at his saddest. It's just a beautiful moment of like acceptance and moving forward. And we really realize that Mr. Miyagi has an arc as much as Daniel does, or a journey to go on in this film. We also learn that Daniel has his driver's license.
That's true, which will come into play in just a minute.
And Mr. Miyagi learns about Allie.
Because in his wallet with a driver's license is the photo.
Yeah, and Daniel's like, we're not, and Mr. Miyagi's like,
Look good together. Different, but same.
Through some contrivance, Daniel has to leave. Although I totally believe that a teenage boy would forget his mom coming home after work to give him a surprise birthday.
Yeah, it is a little odd that, like, he says, like, he knew his mom had a surprise plan for him, like a cake and stuff. So he has to go do a second birthday party, essentially.
Exactly. In my headcanon, Daniel has shown up to train, and Mr. Miyagi's like, "You're not training today. Today, it's a surprise party for you."
Uh-huh.
And so, Daniel's mom is like, "Why is he running late?"
Right.
Daniel's like, "Why am I running late?"
Yeah.
But at this moment, Mr. Miyagi gives him the number 2 birthday present.
This is a big night for Daniel. Lots going on.
And it's also, incidentally, we learn the night before the tournament. So anyway, Mr. Miyagi says, time for your second birthday present. They go outside as he's walking Daniel out, and he tells him to choose a car.
Yes.
From the lot of old cars from Detroit.
Yes.
That are sitting there.
And rather than go with the compact Studebaker or anything more reasonable, he goes right for the obvious choice, which is the the
1948 Ford convertible.
Yes.
Yeah, and Mr. Miyagi already knew that he would, because Mr. Miyagi's dog tags are the keychain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when Daniel was going through Mr. Miyagi's things that night, when Mr. Miyagi was passed out, he also saw Mr. Miyagi's military dog tags.
Yes.
And now Mr. Miyagi has given them to him as a keychain on the car that he knew Daniel would pick.
Yeah, and this is another scene that it's definitely in the highlight reels for Karate Kid, which is the balance speech.
Yeah, because you know, Mr. Miyagi says, you know, Daniel's beside himself about the car and what a gift, and he gets in the car, and yet he's still, like, he has Ralph Macchio's serious face, and he's like, you know, and Mr. Miyagi's like, what's the deal? Why are you nervous? And what's wrong? And Daniel said, I'm just nervous about tomorrow. And that's the moment where Mr. Miyagi says, you know,
You remember a lesson about balance, eh?
Yeah.
A lesson not just karate only. Lesson for whole life.
it's not just that you're doing this, it's the whole picture of your life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the moment where Daniel says,
You're the best friend I ever had.
yeah.
Sometimes it's great when you can take the subtext of a movie and make it text. You really have to pick and choose your moments, but when you can do it, like being able to hammer home a point like that can really make an impact.
Yeah, and it, you know, it's beautiful. Ralph Macchio has said, everyone is like, hey, what's your favorite line from the movie? Is it wax on, wax off? And Ralph Macchio's like, no, that you're the best friend I ever had is the purest line I've ever said as an actor.
Yeah.
You know, it's a beautiful scene too, because if anyone's ever had a relationship with a mentor or a non-familial parent that they love, that scene where Daniel says that to Mr. Miyagi really doesn't even need to say anything back. Like, he's beaming, and he just says, you're pretty okay too, and Miyagi speak. And so Daniel's like, perfect acting from Pat Morita. He's like, go find your balance.
Yeah, that's where he says it.
And
yeah.
really, it's like, go find your girl, right? Go find the thing that you haven't resolved.
Do anything to take your mind off of it, but obviously this is the other thing that you have your mind the most on, so maybe this is the most useful thing to take your mind off of it. Like, this is the balance for the other nervousness.
That's right.
Your ultimate, you know,
resolve your unresolved issues.
Yes.
Like, do all you could have done to take care of your life.
Yes.
Is what Mr. Miyagi's telling him, because that will inform your performance. But also, it's just because Mr. Miyagi loves Daniel. Like, this is the moment where we see that Mr. Miyagi has already passed the torch to Daniel. It doesn't matter if Daniel wins the tournament. It doesn't matter, because, you know, Daniel and Mr. Miyagi have already helped each other. They are family. Daniel is allowed to carry now the story of Mr. Miyagi. He's got the dog tags. He's got the gi with the patch that, you know, he's effectively become Mr. Miyagi's son. It's not that Mr. Miyagi has forgotten his family, it's that now he's got this family.
Yeah.
And it's all part of the same tapestry. It's just beautiful. So Daniel, off he goes.
Yes.
And Mr. Miyagi cheers him on.
Yeah. And so we are back to the golf and stuff.
We're never leaving golf and stuff.
No.
And Daniel, this is a great scene, because Daniel comes in, he's got his swagger back. It's a legitimate earned swagger. He's got a car now.
Yeah.
It's not
whatever his mom's surprise was. We've skipped right over that.
No, I mean, I think it's that he's you know, the balance for Daniel is that his mom will understand. It's supposed to be a surprise. He's going to stop in and see his you know, the woman he loves on his way home.
My headcanon just says this is a long night. Like, whatever happened with his mom, like, yeah, she gave him a cake. It was not that interesting, and we have now skipped forward like another 2 hours.
It's a lot of carb loading the day before your tournament. All that cake.
Yeah, that would be a lot of cake the day before the tournament.
Exactly.
But
anyway, so here we are at Golf and Stuff, and Daniel's trying to talk to Allie and her friends, and Allie's clearly angry at him. You know, she just plays the arcade games and then walks away from him, and just whatever it takes to get away. Daniel's trying to sweet talk her, and then her friend is like, you know, get away from her. Like, what's wrong with you? Can't you take a hint? And Daniel's like, well, yeah, you know, like, she really cared when she was using me to get to Johnny, and they were making out on the dance floor, and I think it's Susan, right? Her friend Susan is all, you really have no clue, do you? That's Julie Fields actually is playing Susan. She's like, you really have no clue, do you? That, you know, she hit him. You know, she didn't want him to make out with her.
Yes.
And the best line of the movie, which I think you referred to as sixth wave feminist when we were watching it.
This is nth wave feminism right here.
Daniel's like, well, she didn't explain it to me, and Susan's like, she shouldn't have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Get a grip, man.
Yeah, Allie owes you nothing.
Exactly. Why did you think that everything had to unfurl in front of you like a giant scroll.
Even though this literally is your narrative, this isn't your narrative,
exactly.
dude.
You were more than your own headcanon,
Yeah,
Daniel.
exactly.
And so the Daniel's like, oh no, the penny's dropped, and he has to run out and find her. And he calls her Slugger, which, if Ralph Macchio, if you're listening, you want to call me Slugger anytime you can.
Mm-hmm.
And charms her after apologizing into kissing him.
Yes.
And lets her drive his hot new wheels.
Yes. His Hot Wheels. Yes.
His Hot Wheels.
Yeah. So
infinitely hotter than any Corvette.
So now, here we go.
It's tournament time.
Big time. Here we go.
We
are now
All
in the
Valley.
home stretch.
Yeah.
The All Valley 18 tournament.
Under 18 tournament, yeah.
Yeah. We have a great, fun little scene here at the sign-ups where we're trying to even get into the tournament. Miyagi's standing there signing him up, and the sign-up guy is like, oh, what belt are you? Because we're now back in a world where belts matter again.
Yeah, open entry requires brown or black belt.
Yeah, brown belt or higher. And Miyagi's like, oh, yeah, he's a black belt. Yeah,
and then
don't even worry about it.
And then instantly holds Allie back to help him steal a belt.
Yeah, he does a little fake out with the sign-up guy so he could steal the belt out of his bag.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the only time that Mr. Miyagi, aside from his intimate relationship with Daniel, corrects someone how to pronounce his name. He's like, no, it's Miyagi, not Miyagi.
Yeah.
Just so she will be able to steal that belt.
Yeah.
And they get to the locker room. And this is, to me, one of the most menacing moments in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Even though nothing really happens, because all the Cobra Kais come in and surround Daniel while he's like his shirt's half on, his chest is exposed.
He's getting in his gi, yeah.
He's getting in his gi, and he's trying to figure out how to even tie the gi.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Johnny Lawrence, Billy Zabka's Johnny Lawrence just glowers and looks actually a little scared of him. And all the other guys are hyping, trying to get him to fight. And Dutch tells him, "You're dead meat." So yikes. Anyway, we see that Daniel's still kind of scared. He's calm, but like, oh geez, what have I gotten myself into? And then they have this gorgeous tracking shot, right?
Yeah.
They establish that Allie's allowed to be on the floor because...
Well, we're doing something very clever here, which is we're alternating these moments of menace with moments of levity. So it's like we get a fun little scene where Miyagi helps steal a black belt, and then we come back to the locker room where we kind of reestablish our threat, and then we come back out here to the big establishing shot of the tournament where we have a little bit more fun with like the tournament officials, and then we have this lovely tracking shot of them showing like the entire like busy tournament hall. It's a big open shot tracking across like pretty much the entire length of the auditorium.
And I think they had to wait for hours to set up that shot, like I was reading. And
I think in the commentary they say they do it like at least 20 times, maybe more. Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't clear if that include like rehearsal or practice runs, but
that
it's
shot
still
is,
a lot.
That shot is excellent because it's got a little bit of everything. It's got all the characters you'll see Daniel fighting. It's got the Cobra Kais. They look like they're doing a Hitler Youth conga line, like running behind them going, Cobra Kai never dies, Cobra Kai never dies.
Yeah, they do their little march, their kind of march into the auditorium, yeah.
It really conveys John Avildsen's attention to detail in terms of setting up that a place is real.
The attention to detail is fully on display here because, again, coordinating this kind of a massive, moving shot that's the rubber meets the road when you're talking about filmmaking.
And when they get to this first fight, it's great because, as you've been saying this whole time, like we know that Daniel's not a Harry Potter. He's not the chosen one. He's just a kid.
Yeah.
He's just a kid, and you can tell that he's never actually fought because he's learned Miyagi-Do.
Oh, yeah.
Always, basically only for defense, never for attack.
Yeah.
So he doesn't even know how to attack.
Well, yeah, again, we get these fun interjections from Mr. Miyagi where Daniel's like trying to ask Mr. Miyagi what to do at the tournament, and Miyagi's like, I don't know, I've never done a tournament before. Like,
Daniel's like, what do you mean? I thought you knew. And Mr. Miyagi's like, I was fighting for my life, not for some dumb tournament.
Yeah, exactly.
Okinawa was a rough place.
Yeah.
In 1930.
Yeah, exactly. We'll learn more about that in the next movie, but it's a very interesting juxtaposition, street knowledge versus applied knowledge. What goes in a tournament doesn't necessarily apply to real life and vice versa. And in fact, Allie does something very important here is that apparently she's been hanging out with Johnny so much that she knows the karate point system, and she pulls Daniel aside as they're doing the walk around. And
I think it's no points for below, but anything above the waist.
That's true.
gets you a point.
Okay, yeah. I don't know how the points work either, but she basically gives it the rundown to Daniel.
That's why they fake her out as Mr. Miyagi's translator, so that she can be there to give the technical assist.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Because Mr. Miyagi DGAF about the actual rules of this tournament.
Exactly.
So
things get off to a slow start for Daniel. Like, he gets run out of the ring a couple times.
And the ref says, like, if you do that, if you go out of bounds one more time, you lose a point.
Yes,
so
exactly.
That's serious. And Mr. Miyagi's like, just do it, guy.
Yeah.
And then I think he drops the guy, or at least he gets the point on the guy.
Yeah.
The very first, the thing after that, like he goes after it.
Because everybody else in the ring is theoretically practiced, but Daniel's responses are automatic at this point.
Daniel has synthesized the Miyagi-Do defense.
Cue, you're the best around.
Yeah, which Esposito has said. I think that's what I'm most known for, and we're all like, yeah, man. And this is great because we get a little mini showcase of all the people that we've seen, like the actors playing the Cobra Kais and Daryl the doll, the stunt artist, the martial artist who poured in some of the stunts and did the crane kick.
Yeah. As himself, I noticed in the credits.
Yes, he's credited as himself.
Yeah.
We see that Daniel's neighbor Freddie is in the audience, and I don't know if that's because Freddie has decided Daniel's cool enough to talk to now, or if it's just because in the Valley, this is what you do on a Saturday night or a Sunday night and watch the karate match.
Karate is the biggest thing in the Valley, I guess.
Exactly.
At this point in time.
Exactly.
And rightly so.
Here we are, everyone's there, and we also get to see a little bit more about the dynamics between the Cobra Kais and Kreese. Yeah, Kreese, making power fists at Bobby when he's kicking ass, and
he's real cock of the walk.
Yeah.
He and the Cobra Kais think that they've got this locked up. But presumably they always do, because they're just so brutal that they always go right to the finals of the tournament.
Except for Billy Zabka, who is Johnny. I don't know I think Johnny's scared. I think Johnny knows, because Johnny is the leader of the pack, and he's taken the licks from Mr. Miyagi, and his face is both cocky but also offended. I cannot believe I'm having to do this. I cannot believe this kid is still here.
Yeah, I think on the rounds where we're cutting to them watching Daniel, I definitely see that, but I also noticed some nice little bits of business during the other matches, like with Vidal and some of the other contenders, where Kreese and Johnny are just having little inaudible exchanges, like you would
like football coaches.
Yeah, exactly.
On the side of a field.
Like, oh yeah, watch that move, see what he did there. Yeah. It's very cool, attention to detail, nice little bits of realistic business.
This is also the first time that we really get a sense. I mean, we've seen the Cobra Kai's pounding Daniel, and we've seen how they look as a mass together in their uniforms, but this is the first time that we really see how powerful Johnny is as a martial artist, because he's huge, he dominates, and he's got these ruffles and flourishes. They learned the Korean style of karate that Pat Johnson, the stunt coordinator, was trained in. Machio and Morita did Okinawan style when they trained.
Yes.
And so we see the difference between Daniel's spare and conserving moves that have this power behind them from not moving, but whereas we see that Billy Zabka as Johnny, that character, has height and force and all this technique that makes him a juggernaut on the mat.
Do we want to say anything else about these preliminaries before we get to the final match?
They're just a lot of fun. A friend of ours was saying, I don't know if I would like this movie because I don't really like movies where there's fighting. And I was like, good news. This is a movie where the object is not to fight. But
that's true.
But for those who care about karate, this is the only moment in which we see karate, the way it might be in a place where karate is that big of a deal. I was reading in the oral history of the Karate Kid that some of the actual martial artists were sniggering on the side of the mats because they were like, ugh, this isn't real karate. But I think in this moment you do see some of the culture of what it would be like. And that's really, really fun. If I had been waiting the whole movie to be like, this is a movie about the Karate Kid. Where's the actual fighting? The fair fighting?
To that point, I say that this is the difference between what makes a movie is this sense of authenticity. If you have little pieces that are authentic, that sells the stuff that is BS, right?
Yeah, it's there's actually literary critic Roland Barthes calls that the reality effect.
Yes.
Like, it's got these little details that aren't hitting you over the head, but they have nothing to do with the plot, but they're essential to maintaining the veracity of the plot.
You're doing down payments on your climax, essentially. You can have your karate match culminate in these fake moves if you spend the rest of the movie kind of establishing that, there is like a certain realism to this world.
And may I just make a shout out to Chad McQueen, evil Dutch from the Cobras, who towards the end of the montage has been telling Daniel he's dead meat and comes out like a crazy anarchist. And after kicking Daniel in the face, Daniel's like, oh, and just like, takes him out, scores his point. And Kreese and Johnny turn away in disgust. It's a beautiful moment watching that guy get his comeuppance.
Yeah, he drops him like a sack of potatoes. It's pretty great.
So here we are in the finals, and the first, we know that it's going to be Johnny, Daryl Vidal, who plays the one who we haven't seen before, basically.
He's got like the mantis gi.
Yeah, and then there's Daniel, and then there's Bobby, the kind-hearted Cobra Kai.
Yes.
And Ron Thomas is actually, of course, a multiple black belt and now mixed martial artist in real life. They had brought him along because he could do the special stuff. So it's the first up is Johnny versus Daryl Vidal's, Karate Kid. Johnny beats him, but it's a beautifully shot match.
Oh yeah, at this point they've got all their best choreographed people, in front of the camera, and it shows.
Yeah, and the next match after Johnny drops the opposition is Bobby versus Daniel, and Bobby is the one who told Johnny when they were wailing on Daniel on Halloween, "No, he's had enough, man. Like, stop it." Like Bobby is the most even. Yeah. Of the Cobras.
And yet this is who Kreese chooses to take Daniel out.
Right. I mean, you got to think what a sociopath or what a megalomaniac Kreese is. Like, Bobby's like, I can take this guy out. And Kreese is unwilling to ensure that the victory goes to Cobras. Instead, he's like, just do your best to take this kid out. Injure him beyond the point that he can.
Well, he's not even like, do your best. He's just like,
do it. Yeah, and Bobby says, but Sensei, I'll be disqualified.
Kreese is not even concerned with, the rules of the game. It's just win at any cost. He, as an army guy, is reliving Vietnam in every social interaction, no matter what the consequences.
Including wanting the Asian mentor across the mat to suffer.
Yeah, he's not concerning himself with the morality. Johnny wins by default.
And at this
Cobra Kai wins by default.
We see that at least Bobby and Johnny know this is jacked up.
Yeah.
Like, we can tell Johnny's like, wait a second, like, what's going on? And looks and has his kind of scared, like, this is out of my control. Look, at that moment, Ron Thomas delivers on his excellent martial arts skills and pops Daniel in the knee.
Yes.
And this is some superlative acting between Ralph Macchio and Pat Morita here.
Well, also, at this point, doesn't Bobby, get down on the mat and he's like, I'm so sorry.
Daniel, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it.
Even though they're doing exactly what Kreese wants and, they're falling right in line, they're still, super remorseful throughout the whole thing, which is interesting.
It's coming out. This supposed fair fight of the tournament, the scales fall off of all this bluster and all this militant crap. And they see that, they're fighting fair. Daniel's fighting fair. They've shown up, as honest men, and now this.
Yeah.
Beautiful acting from Ralph Macchio and Pat Morita, especially when you consider that they had already rehearsed this countless times and one whole videotaped run through, and yet they bring it like it's the very first time any of this has ever happened. And they go into the locker room, because Daniel is injured. He has 15 minutes to come back out, and and his mom and Allie are sad for him, and then Daniel's like, give me a minute alone, Mr. Miyagi, will you stay? Because Mr. Miyagi's like, it didn't matter whether you won or lost. Yeah. And then Daniel says to Mr. Miyagi, but I know that, but I still want this. I'm not going to have my balance. And then Mr. Miyagi realizes that Daniel's learned the lesson of balance and agrees to help him.
Yes.
Yeah.
If what balance means to you is going out and just having Johnny smear you all over the tournament mat, then okay,
I will
now
use my in specific esoteric healing ability to relocate your knee.
Yeah.
And we will go out together.
Yeah, I'll walk you out there to get your ass handed to you if that's how you find your balance.
And the way that he puts his hand on Ralph Macchio's head and says, close your eyes, and Ralph Macchio just closes his eyes in this gesture of total trust in Mr. Miyagi, right?
Sure.
At this point,
it's earned.
Daniel's no longer like, what the hell, man? What are you doing with your rubbing your hands together? Like, what are you doing having me paint your fence? Like, Daniel's like, no, we're in this together. And out we come. And now there's this guy about to give the trophy to Johnny and Kreese, and they're looking very proud of themselves. And Allie's like, actually, wait, Daniel LaRusso's going to fight.
There's intercutting, but it never feels like it. That's the crazy thing. It's like this all feels like it's one continuous shot, even though it's not.
Yep.
Everything, it feels kind of improvisational, where like the announcer's like,
Daniel LaRusso's gonna fight? Daniel LaRusso's gonna fight!
There's a great little moment where Daniel corrects the announcer on Mr. Miyagi's name again.
Yeah, Daniel's like, what the hell? What do I care? They've already done all this stuff. Like, I've got nothing to lose. Make sure that you pronounce my karate master's name correctly. Another great moment that happens here is that as Daniel runs out, we see Freddy, his friend from the very first scene, who he accidentally karate kicks through the gate and who left him lying in the sand. Israel Huarbe, as Freddy, is going crazy on the sidelines when he sees that Daniel's come out.
That is pretty great.
And we see that Johnny is like, oh my God, what is happening? Like, he's just shaking his head in shock and balling his fists in nervousness. Like, he's now had the trophy taken away from him with no time to emotionally prepare.
That's true.
And they get right into it, right?
So we got Daniel and Johnny. Johnny, again, looking huge compared to Ralph Macchio. He's got, the patches all down the leg of his gi of the 4 or 5 tournaments and stuff that he's already won. Looking every inch like the most imposing dude you ever met in high school.
Yeah, he's like a synthesis of an evil prom king,
right?
And a karate champ. So, good luck to Ralph Macchio. And this is a real moment where, we see the subtle play of like classism and racism, right? Like in every sense, Johnny is stacked to win this.
Yeah,
in every sense,
for sure.
And Ralph Macchio is a pipsqueak who comes from nothing. He's got an obvious like East Coast accent. He's Italian.
Yep.
So he's at a moment when Italians were sort of racially marked coming out of the 20th century. Like when that was a thing. And so it's really amazing because with the way they make these wide shots, Daniel is tiny. Like he's like a giant puppy. And he's going up against the scary Karate King.
Zabka is just like going full force towards Macchio, pushing him out to the edge of the mat, and then Macchio gets in the perfect like counter right at the last second before he gets ring out. The
way that Mr. Miyagi has trained Daniel, right? He's synthesized. He's a defensive machine because he doesn't have to think about the defense. He can see the opportunities to go on offense.
Yeah.
The thing about it is that Johnny is freaked out. I think Daniel scores at least 1 and maybe 2 points.
Yeah. What this reminds me of? I watched a YouTube video not too long ago of Muhammad Ali doing rope-a-dope.
Yeah.
Like Daniel is
Okinawan rope-a-dope.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Yeah, I think there's some definite parallels there of being conservative in a fight, saving your shots, and Daniel is saving his shots for when they actually count.
That's right. Daniel can make Johnny hurt. Like at one point he drops him to the mat using, I believe, the thing that Mr. Miyagi did to him in the golden hour when they were training punches by the reservoir.
That's right.
Daniel drops Johnny and makes Johnny's nose bleed.
If you watch the fight choreography, you definitely see these great little moments where Daniel calls back moves that happened way earlier in the movie
that we weren't explicitly told to learn. Wax on, wax off, and side to side, paint the fence, sand the floor. Like that's obvious. But these other flourishes are things that Daniel has learned either from Mr. Miyagi or through osmosis in his quest to imitate Mr. Miyagi.
Exactly.
We're being set up to know that Daniel knows more than we even realize.
Daniel learned.
Yeah, Daniel learned. Daniel's been watching. And he learned because he loved Mr. Miyagi, not because he was drilled by a terrifying, Nazi drill sergeant.
Right.
Yes.
He was drilled by a loving father figure.
Exactly. With a penchant for the ridiculous. So anyways, there they are. And at that moment when Daniel drops Johnny and causes his nose to bleed, the Pat Johnson as referee is like, go to your sensei.
Take your corners, yeah.
Yeah, and Martin Cove as John Kreese looks at him, wipes the blood out from under his nose in his own fatherly gesture and says,
sweep the leg.
Yeah.
Meaning go for Daniel's injury.
Yeah. And the expression on Zabka's face is like really?
Yeah.
Like, even though he's been here for the entire tournament listening to
Kreese's bile,
to Kreese's bile, he still can't believe that he's being asked to do this shit, like, even in the finals. But Johnny's still gonna do it.
But well, first he sweeps the leg. I think he brings him down with that leg once in a more subtle way. Like, he's not willing to...
That's true.
...to go for it yet. We can see that Johnny, they have him building up to really hurting Daniel again.
Yeah.
Johnny grabs his leg and then just elbows him back in the injured knee.
Yeah.
And down Daniel goes. And that's a moment where, Mr. Miyagi can't run onto the mat to save him, but Daniel's in pain. And, he's lying there writhing. Kreese looks at Mr. Miyagi like, what's your boy going to do now, huh? And so Daniel has to get up on his own.
Yes.
The music, you can tell from the musical cues, Bill Conti's letting us know, like, this is it. Like, if the kid doesn't pull this out, like, that it's over. We all go home.
Conti's going crazy in the recording booth right now.
We've got a crazy Conti.
Yeah, exactly. So Daniel gets up on one leg because he can't use the other one.
Yep.
And
is this where the dude on the sideline screams,
"Get him a body bag! Yeah!"
All right. Yeah,
which
one
is
of the
another
Cobra
great
Kais.
little recording booth ad lib.
Yeah. And Avildsen said, I need something. And he yells, "Get him a body bag." And Avildsen's like, "And now you're immortal."
Yeah.
That's like his game over, man. Like that's his Bill Paxton moment.
Fucking A.
Yeah, and so there we go. Boom. Daniel gets back up, and the ref is like, "Are you okay, son? Like, can you continue?" And Daniel's like, "I mean, yeah, I can do it." And we don't know what the hell Daniel's going to do. And then we hear the crane theme. Daniel's got his arms up. Mr. Miyagi, I think, didn't know until this moment that Daniel had learned that move. Like, Mr. Miyagi is in there with Daniel. Almost like bows in acknowledgement of what Daniel's about to do. Because if done right, no can defense.
That's right.
And at one point, I think Johnny's like, what the hell is this guy doing?
Yeah. Penultimate shot. We got Johnny v. Daniel. Daniel's up in the crane stance. The referee lets it fly. And so does Daniel.
Yeah, so does Daniel. And the way that they have Johnny take this kick and that wide shot, the sound mixing is amazing. Like, down Johnny goes. Serious applause to both Ralph Macchio and Billy Zabka, because Ralph Macchio sells that he could do this. And Billy Zabka sells that Johnny is number one, athletic even as he crawls away on his nose. And second, when it's all said and done, Johnny bows to the massive people running at Daniel and takes the trophy from the announcer.
Yeah.
And, and makes that choice himself. Like, Johnny, at the beginning of the show, wanted to be an ex-degenerate and wanted to make it all work. And this is the moment where Johnny's like, oh, this is how I'm going to try to make it work with what I've got left.
You did it, Johnny. You pulled it out at the last second.
You did. I mean, Johnny was the greater sportsman. It's not like society will necessarily reward him for that. And we know his sensei's not going to be thrilled. But, like, he says, you're all right, LaRusso, good match. And Daniel's like, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Well, like you said, Johnny's just trying to be gracious.
Yeah, no. So Johnny's like, you're all right, LaRusso, good match. And Daniel's like, hey, thanks a lot. And it's a beautifully shot moment, because the way the camera's positioned, we can tell that what matters most is not that Daniel feels satisfaction, but that Johnny and Daniel can connect as like equals.
Yes,
in that
exactly.
moment. And then it's over, basically. They smartly cut to Mr. Miyagi beaming proudly at Daniel.
An insert shot that Avildsen had to fight for later.
Yeah. They had it ending on a more comical note in the parking lot, which they then moved to Karate Kid 2.
That's the more satisfying ending. That's efficient. Daniel wins the tournament. Like, what more needs to be said? We're out. Like,
and Mr. Miyagi's journey is also, at this point, fulfilled, right?
Yeah, and you can see it on both their faces. Super efficient, super clean, no nonsense. In a way, the movie itself is Okinawan karate. You don't get anything you don't need. You save your shots for when you need them.
Robert Mark Kamen would agree.
Thank you.
This podcast has been produced and hosted by Collin Canada and Jenny Carlson.
You can find us online at areyouKarateKiddingMe.com
and wherever you download podcasts.